Hello, everybody, and a very good afternoon to all of you who are tuning in from India today. A good morning from London, England, where the team at Century Tech are hosting this webinar. My name is Charles Wood, and I'm the Head of International at Century Tech. And today I'm going to be your host for what's shaping up to be a really exciting discussion around what the future of education in India will look like. Today is actually a celebration for all teachers, educators, school leaders, and anyone involved in education in any sphere, for the resilience, the passion, and the innovation that has occurred over the past 18 months. We're very excited to be today supported by the Department for International Trade, and in conjunction with Podar Education Network and Oak Ridge International School Group. And Century is extremely excited to bring you this lineup, which you should be able to see now in front of you. Before we start, though, just a few pieces of virtual housekeeping. You'll notice that you have access to a chat box. Please say hello, tell us where you're from, tell us which school you're representing, which organization you're representing. There's also a Q&A box. So if you have questions throughout the session, if you'd like to ask any of our keynote speakers or panelists questions, please do use that function, and someone will be monitoring that. We'll do our best to get your questions answered. We're going to have an epic session of different sort of addresses today, starting off with an opening address, and that is the slight change in our agenda today. I know that some of you will have been expecting Alan Gemmell to come and open. Unfortunately, Alan was tied down with travel commitments, but we're very privileged to have Alan's deputy, Rhiannon Davies, come in and take his place and give the opening address. That will be followed by a keynote from Dr. Lulla, Vandana, who is Podar International School's principal. And then we'll be moving on to a panel session, our first panel session of the day, which is going to be looking at redefining education and some of the lessons that were learned throughout the pandemic. So we've got a stellar lineup of people, educational leaders from across India, and that will be hosted by the wonderful Helen Stride from Century. We're then going to have a short break, so feel free to mute yourselves or turn the audio off, go and get a cup of tea. There'll be a 10-minute break before we then move into the agenda in the afternoon. And I'll go through that after the break. But now it gives me great pleasure to introduce Rhiannon Davies, our opening address speaker. Rhiannon is the Deputy Trade Commissioner for South Asia at the British High Commission in India, and she is responsible for the technology, trade promotion, and science and innovation relationships in India, with a particular focus on the new UK-India Technology Partnership. She's also the co-chair of the India-UK Trade Joint Working Group. So we're incredibly privileged to welcome Rhiannon today. And Rhiannon, over to you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon and good morning, everyone. It is a real pleasure to be here today as part of the Indian Future Learning Summit, stepping in for our Trade Commissioner, Alan Gemmell, who sends his apologies. So as has been said, I'm Rhiannon Davies, and I'm Deputy Trade Commissioner for South Asia. I'm based out of the British High Commission in New Delhi. I've been in India nearly 3.5 years now, and I've seen in that time the great opportunity for educational collaboration between the UK and India. And let me also say up front, a massive hats off to everyone in the sector who has shown such resilience and determination over the past really difficult 18 months. We're two countries with leading capabilities in educational technology, and we have real power to drive positive global educational outcomes. Education lies at the heart of British and Indian collaboration and research, and has long been a cornerstone of our country's positive relationship. The UK and India's wider bilateral relationship is growing ever stronger. In December 2020, the UK's Foreign Secretary and Indian Education Minister met in person and jointly announced the creation of a bilateral task force to look at the mutual recognition of qualifications. Earlier this year, our Prime Ministers held a virtual summit where they agreed a 2030 roadmap, providing both countries with a shared strategic direction for collaboration over the next 9 years. They also announced an enhanced trade partnership, setting a high ambition for our trading relationship and setting their intention to launch free trade agreement negotiations before the end of this year. The education commitments in these agreements build upon the success of a number of long-standing bilateral programmes in play. The UK-India Education and Research Initiative, or UKERI, managed by the British Council, is an excellent example of such a strategic initiative and has long been strengthening education and research across the UK and India. UKERI provides a strong research talent pipeline between the two countries, and with the programme in its 15th year, continues to deepen the relationship between academia and industry in both countries. The UK's new graduate route provides new opportunities for talented Indian students to look for work in the UK after they graduate. We're already seeing a large increase in granted study visas to Indian nationals, up 30% in the year ending June 2021, even during COVID. This is great news, not just for the present, but for the future and shared prosperity. As we know, educational ties between our countries increase the chance of greater trade ties down the road. The shared intention to deliver a comprehensive free trade agreement, expanding our trading relationship to the mutual benefit of both our societies and industries, offers a catalytic opportunity. This is just one element of an ever-deepening bilateral relationship, and I'm confident that with those strong foundations, the UK and India can be at the forefront of finding solutions to some of the world's most pressing global educational challenges. The COVID-19 pandemic has galvanised policymakers, educational systems and private industry across the world to re-evaluate education provision and educational outcomes for learners of all ages. Over the past year and a half, kindergarteners, schools, private educational centres, further education colleges, universities and physical education settings all forced to close their doors to learners, with many moving their delivery online. The UK and India have both been important players in finding the best solutions to these challenges. While the UK and its population of 67 million has the fourth largest edtech market globally, India has the second largest market for e-learning in the world. The UK has a long history of embedding edtech in the classroom. According to the technology historian Neil Selwyn, the first officially documented use of edtech in English schools was in 1924, when the Prime Minister commissioned a series of educational radio broadcasts that were played to children nationwide. Fast forward to the modern day, and a variety of cutting-edge edtech solutions are employed in classrooms throughout the country. In April 2019, the UK government published its EdTech strategy aimed at supporting UK education providers and the technology industry to improve and increase the effective use of technology in education. We're a country that recognises the importance of EdTech, and this strategy was supported by the government with £10 million over 2 years. UK EdTech is also highly attractive to international investment, receiving over a third of all European venture capital. In April of this year, the UK government published its international education strategy, which sets out our strategic direction and support for the sector's work internationally. The importance of India to the UK is clearly recognised in this, with India cited as a top priority partner. The UK is home to truly world-class edtech solutions, many with an intrinsically international outlook. We host 60% of Europe's top 20 edtech companies, with a top country in Europe for artificial intelligence, with further significant capability in gamification, mixed reality immersive content, massive online open courses, and cybersecurity. With our formidable global presence, the UK is a proven, trusted gateway to e-learning opportunities, valued at £174.6 billion by 2022. UK EdTech is driven by a desire to widen education and improve educational outcomes around the world. An example of this is the member companies of the British Educational Suppliers Association, which provided £36 million of free resources and expertise to international partners and governments in the first 3 months of the COVID pandemic alone. Take three edtech companies, Littlebridge, Manga High, and Twig Education, who worked with the Mexican government to provide free access to English language, maths, and science solutions to Mexican children using their government's Learning at Home platform. Or Twinkle, which was founded when its founder had difficulty sourcing material for lessons. The teacher decided to create their own resource and publish them online. Today, Twinkle is a major educational publisher trusted by educators in more than 196 countries. It delivers digital education materials for every step in a child's education, as well as special needs providers and adult learning. Widening educators and learners' access is what drives UK EdTech, an inspirational goal, and I know one that drives Indian partners also. A recent example of collaboration between a UK EdTech company, Click to Learn, and an Indian NGO, Go Dharmic, aims to improve access to English language learning to students from the economically challenged section of the society in Maharashtra and Rajasthan. Click to Learn is now looking to replicate this model in other Indian states by partnering with the state governments and the corporates who are funding education-related projects through corporate social responsibility. The Government of India's new National Education Policy, or NEP, announced last year, seeks to enhance the digitisation and access of Indian education. Indeed, the Digital India campaign is helping to digitally empower society, and the creation of the National Education Technology Forum, set out in the NEP, is an important step to increasing the use of technology in education. Our international education champion, Professor Sir Steve Smith, has already met a number of officials throughout India to discuss the role that the UK can play in supporting these ambitions. I hope that the summit provides a platform for everyone to take stock of how learning has changed over recent times, and indeed to celebrate the successes already achieved through a very tough period. If we work together, we can find even better ways to leverage EdTech for the benefit of learners worldwide. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for that opening address, Rhiannon. And I think what really highlighted for me was the sort of bilateral relationships that occur between India and the UK. And I loved your anecdote of the EdTech that was being used in 1924. That's certainly a new one that I've had to note down. So thank you very much for coming and participating. We're now moving on to our first keynote speaker of the conference. Is a lady who I can call my friend. I've known for nearly 3 years now. We're very privileged to have Dr. Vandana Lulla join us today. Dr. Lulla is the director of Podar Group of International Schools who undertake the IB and Cambridge curriculum. She's also the Vice President of the South Asian International Baccalaureate Schools Association and was appointed as the accreditation team member for the prestigious Council of International Schools accreditation team. Whilst doing all of that, she's also managed to hold a doctorate degree in managing students with SEN using technology, and her school has won numerous awards for both parental involvement as well as Best School Award, recognised by various organisations across India. So Dr. Lulla, we are extremely privileged to have you here today, and we're very excited to hear what you have to say. And the stage is yours. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Charles, and a very, very good afternoon to one and all. And of course, good morning to all those who are on the other side of the world. It's such a pleasure and honor and a privilege to be here this afternoon to be giving the opening speech and the keynote address today. I must say, by the end of March 2020, the COVID pandemic was everywhere, leaving no country untouched, resulting in the closure of most schools, colleges, and universities in India. The world changed overnight for everyone because the pandemic affected nearly 1.6 billion learners in more than 190 countries and all continents. Though there were many, many negative impacts, like we all know that during the COVID-19 outbreak, there was a lot of disaster that came to all parts of the world. However, when we look at the negative impacts, we also do not forget the positive impacts. And I always feel that anything that happens around the world, there is a good and there's a bad. There's a positive and there's a negative. So looking at the positive side of the pandemic and the impact on education, the entire ecosystem of education changed, and teachers, students, and parents adapted so well to the changed ecosystem. For years and years, technology was a backseat in most schools, most institutions, organizations did not invest in education where technology was concerned, and they kept technology as the backseat. However, because of pandemic, technology became the forefront. Online learning, webinars, online classrooms, teleconferences became a common phenomenon where everything happened using technologies. Schools went virtual and everybody was behind the screens. Now, this is what actually changed the entire ecosystems of education. It is true that some years ago, the father of the nation, that is Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, somebody asked Gandhi, the father of the nation, how can I change the world? And I still remember what Mahatma Gandhi said to the person, it starts from you yourself. And when I think of that, and when I look back at my journey at Podar International School, I'm very proud to say that way back in 2011, we started our journey. We started with interactive boards. We started with our iPads in classroom, laptops in classroom, and we actually bought technology in the class way back in 2000, continued in 2011. And then in 2019, we were really, really happy. That's when in 2019, we started our partnership with Century Tech. Century Tech was a game changer at Podar International School. And I'm very happy that I made that progress and that kind of journey way back in 2019, because I'm sure everybody knows it's an award-winning artificial intelligence teaching and learning platform that allows schools to create personalized pathways for every student. And during this pandemic, I think all these students really enjoyed using the Century Tech. It was like a blessing for these students as it helped them to independently learn various concepts and also have personalized learning where they could be tracked easily. The gifted students could move up with booster nuggets. The children who could not understand or had some learning gaps would be able to go back and go below the concept that they're learning, an easier concept, and then take them to the next level. So I think that our partnership with Century Tech way back in 2019 helped us a big time. Also, students with various learning disabilities. We all know I've done my doctorate in managing children with learning disability using technology. I think it was very, very easy for us to assign nuggets of Century Tech and give those resources to children who could complete it at their own space and progress very clearly. So all students during this pandemic had that independent platform where they could actually move their attainment and progress to the next level. So I think that was the best part of our journey of using technology and using the Century Tech platform. Another thing that happened during this pandemic, I think, was a great partnership with parents. I think the parent community suddenly realized the importance of school and teacher. And I think the entire parent community relationships became very, very strong, I think, during the COVID time, where students were supported by the parents at home and, of course, the teaching learning from school. So I think that whatever you say, pandemic has shown how we can come together and partner and give the best education to our children. And I think that one thing that is going to happen now when the schools are all going to open, We have started school just last week and we have more than 200 plus students coming to school. It's definitely, there's a lot of energy come back to school. But when you look at India and when you look at the future of this country, and of course, the pandemic is not something that's going to disappear overnight. I think we all need to know that the blended models, the hybrid models, and the virtual learning and technology is sure to remain. We heard from our keynote speaker about all the collaborations and all the resources that are available online for students will continue to avail. And the hybrid model, there may be a situation where schools have large number of students, may not be able to accommodate all students in the campus, keeping in mind the government restrictions. So the hybrid model again is going to be a very, very important, and the key model is that how do you use various platforms around the world that are available to maintain the quality of education, to make sure that the students' skills at all times are developed, even though we know there's so much of uncertainty that's around all of us. So how do we make sure that the students' skills, concepts, understanding, knowledge is not lost during these times? So keeping in mind that we all think that India is a place where you see innovation, endless innovation. I was surprised to see in the last 2 years, children have come up with apps. Students in my school, grade 5, 6, 7, have come up with apps where they're using design apps for vertical farming, design apps for farmers, design apps for hospital. And the kind of coding and design thinking is one of the subjects that we teach at the school, which has allowed students to come up with so many innovations. And school is going to be a changed place in the days to come. So many students have published books in this pandemic. In the last 2 years, you will see that children have done unbelievable work. We have a student who's become the Wonder Girl, where she works with all CEOs on various projects. So children have gone beyond the teachers. And I think that when you think of this India's Future Learning Summit, some years back, people thought India still has snake charmers and elephants on the road. But no, India is about innovation, creativity, resilience, and tolerance. And that's something that comes up as not that we are Indians and so we have this kind of quality, but I think India lives, not because we stay in India, but I think India lives inside all of us. And India is something that very strongly believe. You see the number of startups that the children have come up in grade 11th and 12th. Small entrepreneurship startups that they have started to build on, worked on various projects. So I think in this challenging time of India, there is an opportunity. And I am sure that in spite of this limitation that we have, India is a place where you would see a brighter future, and the clear, easy adaptability of technology is what takes this country ahead. And we can continue to have high quality learning is something that we strongly believe in. So I'm sure that high quality learning is something that will still happen, which has happened in the last 2 years. Most schools in the country have got excellent results. I must say very, very clearly, I was amazed to see my students in the crucial pandemic time. We had 300 students in the campus who wrote the exam. And unbelievable to see, even though they never attended school, they were able to progress in their attainment and their progress was excellent. So I'm sure that we will continue to develop our student skills and also develop resilience and creativity in all students in the days to come, even though there are uncertainties around us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lulla, for such an impassioned, reflection on what has occurred and also looking forward to the future. And certainly what I took from that was that it's now an opportunity to build upon what has occurred. And certainly we've seen this a lot where schools have embraced educational technology, used it throughout the pandemic, and now everyone's excited and happy to be back in a face-to-face environment. But we must think about how we can best use this technology to continue improving learning outcomes and not just discard it now that we are starting to move back into the classroom. So thank you very much for sharing those thoughts, and it's wonderful to be your partner for so many years. I would like to just remind the audience, if you do have questions for any of our speakers, please use the Q&A box. It's there to ask questions. You can ask throughout the sessions, and we'll try to put them to the speakers. I can see lots of you have introduced yourselves, and it's great to see representations from across India, as well as countries such as Egypt, the UAE. So please do keep using those functionalities. We are now going to move on to our first panel session of the day, which is titled Redefining Education and Reflecting upon some of the lessons that were learned during the pandemic. Lots of innovation occurred, and Dr. Lulla touched upon some of the innovations that occurred in her school. But we're going to actually open this discussion up to a broader group of educational leaders from across India. And this session is going to be hosted by one of our curriculum leads, the fantastic Helen Stride, who, as a former head of maths, taught for many years, is going to bring her expertise and explore this topic. So over to you, Helen, and your wonderful panelists.
Thank you so much, Charles, and welcome to everyone. My name is Helen, and I am a curriculum lead at Century, which, as many of you in the audience will know, is an intelligent, artificially intelligent teaching and learning tool. It gives me great pleasure to introduce our first panel session today, which is called Redefining Education, Lessons Learned During the Pandemic. And this panel will explore the innovative ways in which schools have navigated the delivery of remote education. So this is obviously a vital topic to discuss for a number of reasons. Firstly, I hardly need to tell anyone in the audience that the past couple of years have been fairly challenging, whichever sector you work in and wherever you have been in the world. But as Dr. Lulla just so beautifully illustrated in her keynote, there is another side of that coin, and these challenges have given rise to some great innovations that hopefully we can learn from, and we can then use those innovations to build a better future. Technology can certainly play a role. And as someone who myself, I moved from the classroom to a technology company, I am certainly biased in terms of how I believe technology can transform education. So you'll not be hearing too much from me. I am very much here to facilitate a discussion between our fantastic panelists today. So first, I'd like to introduce everyone. So first of all, I'd like to introduce Veronica Makwan. Veronica is an educator in Mumbai with over 15 years experience in the IB, the Cambridge and the Indian curriculum. She's handled various responsibilities ranging from teaching and engaging students, monitoring staff, to curriculum planning and development. Her area of expertise is curriculum and assessment design, and using data analysis to maximize student learning and well-being. As a hands-on leader, Veronica fosters success through teamwork. And when it comes to her students, she believes in high-quality education as the way to enable young people to grow in their confidence and independence as learners. So Podar itself, so you've just heard from Dr. Lulla at Podar. Podar is a school that uses Century in a really innovative and effective way to provide those personalised pathways to their students and to tailor assessments to the needs of their cohort as well. She has said before that every child matters, and so it's with a growth mindset and high aspirations that students can achieve anything. So good afternoon, Veronica. Next, I would like to welcome Samir. Samir, who has over 24 years of educational experience, having taught across all levels of school from upper primary, middle school, senior secondary, He has fostered partnerships with educational organisations and members of the community. He has also worked within school administration, within resource management, and also as a communicator. And his career has spanned not only many educational organisations, but many cities as well. Samir also believes in the power of travel as the best form of education. So not only has he widely travelled himself, he has also established 2 travel-based startups which offer experiential education programs to the young people. Now, I couldn't possibly name all of Samir's awards. I've seen a very long list, but I'll give you a small selection just to give a little context. So he's recently awarded the Inspirational Educator Award by the International Alliance of Counsellors and Educators. And also under his leadership, Legacy School Bangalore has been recognised School of the Year for Transformative Counselling. So welcome, Samir. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Fantastic. So next I would like to introduce Yashwant. Yashwant is a seasoned education management professional, as well as being the co-founder and director of 21K School, which is India's first online school. He has over 2 decades of experience in designing and executing innovative curricula. In addition, using learning techniques to create an ecosystem of application-based learning for students. So based out of Bangalore, Yashwant has spearheaded various entrepreneurial ventures, including Stratagem EduServe, which is a company aimed at benefiting students and teachers and the education sector at large. Throughout this career, he has contributed to establishing 75 educational institutions. And in his current capacity at 21K, Yash has been working tirelessly to provide quality education to schools across India. This online school can really overcome the challenges of access, equity, and affordability for many students. With 21K School, Yash has a vision to encourage the new generation of learners, providing them with the best possible learning tools for a well-rounded, meaningful, and joyful education. So thank you, Yash, and welcome today.
Yeah, thank you, Ellen. Thank you for having me here. Yeah.
And finally, I would like to introduce everyone to Vineet Gill, Head of Primary at Oak Ridge International School. Vineet started her career as a trainer supporting adults to navigate new technologies so that they could better communicate with the world. But through doing this highlighted to her the importance of a good foundational education. And so she then joined the primary education field, starting out as a homeroom teacher for grade 4. With a never say never attitude, she has moved up and up within the school and influenced decisions and developments both inside and outside of the classroom. She's successfully implemented the International Baccalaureate curriculum, as well as leading the school through its IB evaluation, which, without meaning to understate the achievement, went very well. I think it was 9 commendations received. Vineet has also been instrumental in the implementation of Century as a tool to help teachers and students within the primary school. So through a structured process, she's introduced Century not just as an additional task, but as an instrument of enhancing the daily lessons of English, maths, and science. The feedback from teachers has also been really positive. And Oak Ridge has got started fairly recently with Century, but even in that short time, their usage has increased month on month, and we can't wait to see how that develops. So thank you, Vineet, and welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So just one more bit of admin before I start asking questions to everybody. So for those in the audience, thank you for using the chat function. And I'm just having a look in the Q&A now, and I can see a couple of questions have been asked. During this discussion, please do feel free to ask questions to our panelists, and there should be time towards the end of this panel session to address some of those questions. Okay, so that's the admin out of the way. So I'd first like to ask everyone on the panel the same question, which is, could you set the scene for our audience and just discuss how did you experience the beginning of the pandemic in your schools? Sort of how much warning or guidance did you have, and how did you navigate that? So let's start with Samir.
Okay. I think the last school I was working for was an early adopter of technology. And we were an Apple we were aspiring to be an Apple distinguished school. So we had created an Apple ecosystem in the school. The teachers were trained across the sections, and each teacher had a personal device. So in terms of adapting the school to an online mode was not that much of a difficult challenge for us. What was interesting to see that we tried not to make this mistake like many of our peer schools did, of replicating the offline school into an online school. So the number of hours were considered. We look at WHO guidelines. I think less than 36 hours we were online. But one thing, as a disclaimer, I would like to mention here is that the challenge was as new for us as for anybody else. So we did struggle with one missing piece, which is connecting with children socially. So that was one of the biggest challenge. Adapting to technology wasn't as much because we were the early adapters of technology. And we just got about 24-hour notice to sort of be on our feet and sort of set up the school in online mode.
Wow, 24 hours is pretty tough. Vineet, would you like to give your context?
Yes, so just like Samir's school, even we've been quite apt at using technology. Teachers did have their own devices. We already had an online portal for school and homework. And as schools, as one of our philosophy is that we believe in the 21st century skills. That's what we want to impart. You do need 21st century software and resources. So we were prepared for that. However, being ready was a completely different plan. Fortunately for us, the pandemic decided to hit the day our school session closed. So between that to the next session, we did have a 2-week leeway. And we got that opportunity to train our teachers because, yes, you do have devices, but what do we do with that? And what software, what interface do we adapt? And how quick can our children adapt to that? That was the question. So we picked up, because we were already on Gmail, we picked up the Google Meet. We initially started with that. It took a little while, but we were able to train teachers and as well as our children, because until they were prepared and prepped, the lessons wouldn't happen. So fortunately for us, touchwood for us, we were supposed to start school on 30th of March 2020, and we did start. Though if you go back, I think the entire year has been a blur, and I'm trying to still figure out how we did all of it. But I think we've managed, and I'm sure everybody else has still done really well about that. Yeah.
Brilliant, thank you. And Veronica, what about you? How did you experience the beginning of the pandemic when the news broke?
The pandemic alert was already sensed because the lockdown was imposed in most of the nations. So our planning also began far ahead before the lockdown happened in India. And as Vineet and Mr. Samir said, that even our students and our teachers are all tech proficient, because over a decade, we have been using technology. All our students owned a laptop, and we were already using ebooks, and we had our LMS system also in place. So the proficiency was there, the gadgets and the resources were there. So the only challenging thing was to accept that, okay, now we have to be at home and we have to work from home. So that was the challenge which took us ahead, and it actually opened up opportunities to explore things further and to innovate and to be more creative on such a platform also. So we were sort of ready for what is going to come, because we had already seen things, and it was only how we would move ahead and do wonders on this platform also.
Great, sounds like you were very prepared. And Yash, finally, I'd like to ask you, because obviously your context is a little different, not being in a physical school. So how did you experience that?
Helen, actually, we started school only in June 2020, so about at least a couple of months after the schools went into lockdown. When the schools went into lockdown, I think me, Santosh, and the other co-founders had a very clear thought process vision, and we knew there was a huge mental block. with the parents accepting online education. In fact, when the schools went into lockdown, we had ran a survey which involved about 100 school principals. And based on the guidance that we received from the survey, I mean, we were quite surprised that about 80% of the principals thought that the schools would open by April 15th. Once the lockdown would be over. And I think a small segment thought, probably we'll have a long summer break and by June, the session would start. Santosh especially has been a global traveler. So our thought process was completely different. We saw the mental models being melted, both at the teachers and the parents. They did a fantastic job across India adopting technology, just like fish takes to water. And so we saw that an opportunity and a need to address the concern of the parents who do not have access to quality education or devices at home. And we launched the school in June 2020. It's been a great experience since then. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting about that sort of limited access that some of the students and parents have to technology. And I think in many of your contexts, the students sound like they did have good access, but did you have any challenges reaching any students or any parents? And I don't know who would like to commentate on how you went about addressing some of those needs.
If I may...
Please go ahead, Vinny. Go ahead.
Thank you, Samir. So if I may add, so yes, we did have this challenge because if you look at the statistics, there are around 70% of Indians who didn't actually have access to smartphone, or maybe had bad internet connect, or maybe simply didn't know how to use the system or the device that they have. Similarly, in our school, because we're situated in such a place which has quite a mixed background of people and children, we had a set of parents who had no device whatsoever. So the question for them was, how do you support their learning? Because obviously they couldn't come to school and we couldn't go and teach them as well. So the midway was, we had to look at the resources that were already in school. So fortunately, we had tablets that were part of the school resources. Not a lot of those, but what we did was we brought those tablets out. We allowed the children to come to school, pick them up, and ensure that their learning goes uninterrupted. So that was one of the things we did. The other was for those who still couldn't come and collect, obviously, the systems and the devices that we had. Teachers, I think they've been rock stars in this entire 1.5 years, because they decided that at least I can connect to them through phone. So if evenings, they'd give their spare time to call and check on how they're doing, initially just to see how they're doing in case of their emotional well-being, and kind of prompted them to use their phones, whatever they had, to use texts, and gave them tasks to work so that their learning does continue. So that's how we tried to ensure learning happens.
So Helen and I, we had a similar challenge. We are a school which is under right to education support about 25% of children from marginalized and disadvantaged communities in the neighborhood. So we identified that challenge, and we did have I'm not saying a lot and and upgraded versions, but we did have tablets in school, and we immediately sort of mobilized that to make sure that every single child gets the tab and they continue their learning. The second thing we tried doing was that we wanted to inform all our practices if a teacher is designing a lesson, what kind of technology a child has an access to, from a smartphone to a tablet to a laptop, the whole spectrum of technology, it just changes, right? So we did a parent survey within the first month. We identified what technology majorities are using. So each teacher had an access to information, what kind of technology each child in her class has, and how can she improve the efficacy of teaching and learning practices informed by that survey responses. So we tried doing that. I'm saying, to a great extent, it helped us. But nevertheless, the challenges, I think, were universal in that context. We did have bandwidth issues because suddenly everybody at home, 4 people, 5 people, 6 people on the same bandwidth, no matter what your connection speed was, there were dropouts. So we started creating extra hours beyond school hours. We followed WHO guidelines. We didn't create an online school in terms of an offline school, 8 hours of schooling, 6 hours of schooling. We didn't do that. We went by the age group. The higher age group, the longer you were available. We also allowed, particularly mental health became a major issue because it was a vicious cycle. because children could not connect with each other, because children could not have an access to technology, it impacted their own mental health. So we allowed teachers to create safe spaces for children to walk in, call up, have a telephonic conversation. We made sure we do trainings for early year children's parents, because again, that however hard it's, I know Vineet would endorse that, how difficult it is to, hold the attention of a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old at technology. So we made sure that we have weekly calls with parents, and we train parents on the on the units and the topics and the units of inquiry we're going to follow, so that they can continue supporting children. So there was a multi-pronged approach we followed, but nevertheless, all these challenges were universal. I would say we were successful to a great extent, but there was a lot more we could have done if we look back now.
I think for us, I think the challenge was completely different, since we had a choice in terms of recruiting the teachers and the students who had access to device. But where we actually focused is on changing the pedagogy. Because I think from experience and from our belief, we knew that what worked in the physical school setting would never work in an online school setting. So we had to revamp the entire system of delivery. Contrary to what people would believe, the online classes, each period duration should be 30 minutes or maybe shorter. We in fact spoke to child psychologists and different experts and extended that to 1 hour. And that worked tremendously, because it allowed the teacher to set the classroom, to set the mood of the students, get the students excited about the topic being taught. And we didn't had, at least in the first year, not more than 3 hours up to grade 5, and just 1 hour in the kindergarten and 1.5 hours for the kindergarten. Yeah.
Our challenges were almost similar to what others have spoken. And timetabling, as we said, did not have long hours of schooling. So we put up intimate social breaks in between 2 lectures. So social breaks worked wonders where students could meet their peers, speak, because initially that was the first thing that they started missing. They started missing friends. We also had put into our timetable independent learning time. So giving them time to complete their assignments, and even if they wanted to have one-to-one talk with the teacher. So we gave a lot of independent learning time within the timetable. So that worked again very well with us. The only thing which was really challenging in the start was sending links, getting them online. Sometimes the links didn't work, the links got expired. So this was a bit of hassle. And we kept our communication channel open, where we have WhatsApp groups with parents. And as Mr. Sameer also said, we had lots of orientations for parents, weekly orientations, monthly orientations, where we told them what we are going to do. So this is how we worked on till we found MS Team, which was really a good platform, which we continued further.
For us, Veronica, actually the setting up of the LMS really helped. So you'd be surprised, but parents and teachers never speak on the phone. I mean, so all the communication happened through the LMS, and it's been a much simpler exercise in terms of sharing the links and joining the class, submitting the homework, and so on. Yeah.
I think that's a really good way, because as Veronica also mentioned, the links were a big challenge, and so was, I think, most of us went through that. Additionally, it was the amount of communication that would go. So there's a WhatsApp, there's an email, there's a link. And for parents, it was so much of a hassle. And if they missed one, the child would miss out on a lesson. So how do you balance that was one of the bigger questions. So as Yash, you've added that LMS, which I think is one software which works and creates that portal. Similarly, we had to quickly have our ITT make one portal so that everything goes through one rather than multiple channels. And I think that's the only way you're able to kind of breeze past this virtual learning. And when we move to the hybrid learning, that's going to help.
True. I totally agree. Yeah.
So in all of this, I'm wondering, how do you think the role of the teacher actually changed? Because as Samir alluded to earlier, you can't just take an offline lesson and put it online. Yeah. And now teachers are having to have a completely different skill set. So what do you see that different skill set as being? How did that change during the pandemic? And how did the teachers manage and sort of cope with those changes?
So just like any new solution that you bring to the table, it takes time. And I think major mistakes that we do for anything is just rushing into a solution and saying, okay, let's just do this and implement it. Because ideas and solutions, they're only as strong as the people who have to implement them. So the biggest challenge that we came across in terms of teacher were their workload and how we manage that workload, because you don't want to overburden them. It's new for them as well. You want to balance their emotional needs, and even because they were all at home. So they're in the Indian context, there's a social element to it, there's a family element to it as well. So our question came in that how do we support? Because the biggest problem and the biggest challenging time-consuming element was checking online. I don't know if it was for others, but for us, doing those checks by the teacher and internet being internet, it would fall apart the moment you go to save it, and it would really frustrate the teachers. And that's when we thought of bringing in Century Tech, to be honest. That's how we decided, why don't we do a particular app or a tool or a software which allows that support to our teachers? And that's how we thought of, what do we bring in? And we brought in the Century Tech. And how we implemented was, we took it very slowly. We did it in parts. We just didn't rush to the plan. We had champs in school who first explored the app, see how it works. Then we gave the teachers at least a week to explore it on their own, because we wanted them to come to a training session with questions. Because the problem that we do is we train teachers, then we tell them to go explore it, and then they come back. It wastes a lot of time. We did it the other way. We flipped it. Teachers got an opportunity to explore. They came back, they had questions, and that's how we trained them. Now, then the challenge was, how do you bring it to the child? And we didn't just throw it to the children. Initially in the classes, we just showed the portal and the interface. Children saw how it looks like. They saw how we navigated around. We did PPTs, videos through that. And that's how we then posted to the children. Now, this worked wonders for our teacher, because it cut down their research work by half. It cut down their checking work, because everything is already checked, and gave them so much of resources that they would have otherwise spent hours. So I think knowing that whole why, what, and how works well when you have to plan out a new solution to this and support our teachers.
I don't know if I can speak for many schools, but I've been interacting with a lot of schools since technology is an area of interest for me. And I think a lot of schools were also, because of the low collection of fees, and if the school didn't have a huge financial backup, investing in a new technology was a big challenge. So I think schools were trying to manage with whatever was available within the Google suite or Office bouquet of services, and for that matter, Zoom, but it brought in safety and security issues. So I think we've been dabbling around those issues, like many young schools who've not very established, are on the verge of becoming established. And I'm talking here right now for Tier B, Tier C town, where the fee collection was sitting at 20 to 30%. Right. So at that point of time, how do you make huge investments in commitment of technology? And it's a vicious cycle. Unless you make a significant investment in technology, efficacy of teaching and learning and assessment is always questionable. So a lot of schools, and in Karnataka, we even met the education minister, because in Karnataka, they suddenly said all schools have to slap 30% fee. Now, effectively, if you look at it, there is a cap on year-on-year increment a school can do in terms of fee. And young and growing schools they don't have a capital base. They continue to make significant investments every year in the infrastructure. So eventually, there was no money left with many schools for making any significant investment in technology. And hence, teaching and learning was compromised. In our case, we were good because we had Apple ecosystem. We were early adopters of Google. We had G Suite trainings. And what we also did was, I like Vineet's idea that we had hired 4 people in a tech team. From 1-person team to we've become 4-person team. We realized, and we brought in people who have been educators and have moved on the other spectrum of technology to integrate edtech, so that they understand both sides of the spectrum. So we've made a significant investment in human resource. And what we started doing is we've started microcredit course for teachers online on the school website, where a teacher can log in at their own convenience and quickly do 20-minute, 30-minute short course. We started doing weekly huddles. Every Wednesday is primary, every Thursday is middle, every Friday is high school. For 45 minutes, you can walk in and walk out and learn about a new technology. We started making short videos there were great websites like Edutopia who were giving a lot of resources online talking about what are the most effective tools to increase the efficacy of teaching and learning. So we started making short bite-sized videos. It's about 3-minute, 4-minute video where we talk about a learning tool so teachers can go and explain. So we tried to do multiple prong approach, but except in human resource, we didn't make any significant investment in technology because of a lot of limitations we had at that point of time.
We developed the teacher buddy system. Of course, we already had in place, but this time the teacher buddy system came alive very well. 3 to 4, we used to have a wrap-up meeting. And in the wrap-up meeting, everybody shared good practices, what went well. I tried this new and this worked this way. And the teacher would teach all the other staff. The staff would implement it. And of course, the teacher who brought the thing on the platform to surface on the platform became the buddy for all. And everybody tried out. So we worked gradually in bits and parts with small inventions and innovations on online platform. Because the main focus was how to keep students engaged and motivated even online. Because they started missing face-to-face with the camera off and the mute button being so live for them. They could easily switch off. So how to bring this alive was the biggest challenge. So to keep them motivated, new inventions, new innovations, teachers started finding out. And lots of sharing was happening. So specific sharing time was there within the day, and that really worked wonders.
It is really sad that the role of teachers during the pandemic has not been greatly appreciated by society. I think they have been at the forefront helping parents get back to work and help the society. But unfortunately, I think the due credit to the teachers community has not gone the way probably we would have wanted it.
I think we agree to this.
The teachers work also because, especially during for the primary section, the parents were sitting beside the child, helping in technology and all, actually witnessing the lessons. So even parents got educated in the whole bargain. They learned more than the child.
Reliving the days.
Yes, I think for those who just initiate the IB curriculum, for them, one of the challenges expressing what it is to the parent, because they don't really understand the concept. How is it different? How are you teaching? There's no book. What do you do? How do you learn? And I think this was such an eye-opener for parents because they learned alongside and they realized. So our orientations that generally would happen in the physical school basically were a year-long orientation with the parents' bride being there.
So one thing we also experienced a lot of issues around mental health for children rising up, and teachers' load of pastoral care increased many folds. So we made sure that teachers 15 minutes prior to the classes and half an hour after the day ends are available for children to speak to. And I wish we could have done more for our teachers because they were at the forefront, as Yashwant said. I won't call them less than frontline workers because they maintained, they kept the ball rolling in terms of teaching and learning practices at whatever level. But we could be judged, we could be ripped apart saying we didn't do the good job, but we made sure that the learning continues in whatever form it could. But yes, I think as progressive schools, we should all come together and talk about teachers' mental health as a big concern as well. And I've seen across a lot of teachers post-pandemic have rethought about their career trajectory, and a lot of them have taken breaks now because it is exhausting. It's exhausting. I mean, for every lesson which you would otherwise spend half an hour to prepare offline, it took 3 to 4 times more time to spend that. And managing their own children's classrooms, managing, ironically, we're a patriarchal society, so managing household chores and maids and food and managing your classroom and planning, it was just unbelievable what they did. Salute to all the teachers, I must say. I have a male privilege, but not very proud of it. But yes, our teachers did a lot. Thank you, Yashwant, for bringing that point up.
I agree with Sameer that the teachers took a long time in planning. So to support the teachers with other work like keeping data entry, entering marks, calling the student, maintaining attendance, what we did is we trained our non-teaching staff because offline they actually had nothing concrete to contribute, like our nurse and our lab assistants. We trained them to do all this work, and they assisted the teachers with all the other work, so the teachers could devote more time for planning. So this is how we saw that everybody has a support system to do the other work, and teachers could devote more time for planning and, of course, executing it in the class. That was one thing which we could support teachers for adjusting their load.
I think one thing we did for, because the whole system questions were about teachers. So we would do a weekly catch up kind of a thing where we didn't talk. So what we do is there'll be a set of teachers who say, today we want to teach dance to all the teachers. So the teachers come together, and there'll be set of two teachers who'll just come and dance, and everybody's dancing with them. Then we'll have next week there'll be a teacher who say, I'm going to teach them art this time. So teachers would work together and they'll create art. There were just these small areas where we gave them some opportunity to explore what they liked, and at the same time just interact with each other, because even for teachers, the way children were missing their peers, teachers were missing their peers, because that staff room gossip that happens, you kind of got lost. We created an online link actually for an online staff room, and only the staff could go in, and just whenever they needed a little breakout, they'd go into that link to see who's sitting, if it's secondary teacher or primary or an early year, and they would just chat. I think that was just some small steps to ensure emotional well-being for teachers as well, and they don't require any cost.
I love that you also considered the emotional well-being of teachers. I think teachers get so overlooked sometimes, and actually the students, of course, their well-being is important, but equally important is the teachers who are going to shape those students. Are they being looked after as well? So fascinating discussion. I'm so glad everyone's got so much insight to share. There's some really great questions in the chat. So I would like to pose this question from Sarah, who said, I find this point quite interesting, incorporating independent learning time in the schedule. Could Veronica please shed light on whether teachers were able to follow up on students? Were students really focused on independent work during that scheduled time?
Yes, definitely. Now, independent learning time, the teacher kept the meeting on, and it was, if the student was given a particular assignment, if the student required help for the assignment, the student would join the meeting and the teacher would take care. Now, if the teacher wished that this child has to get an enrichment class or a support class, so during the independent learning time, the teacher called that one child or two children to support them, or students walked in. So that was the time that we called as independent learning time, where the child, even off-screen, could read a book or do something. So off-screen time also was incorporated in this independent learning slot, which was kept in the timetable. So that is how it worked.
Just to add on here to what Veronica said, we are so fond of compliances that we don't allow our children, we don't trust our children that they would do something good by themselves. Please allow them. If they don't do it one day independent learning time, they would do it the next day or the day after or the day after. I think we continue to have more meaningful conversations with children at the humane level, saying why it is important to have independent learning time, what skills are they building up. And I think at this point, if we can't trust our teachers and children, then I think in no time, then education is not in right hands. We need to rethink. So I think the efficacy of independent learning time was directly proportionate to the teacher who was leading the class, let me tell you. And I think that is where we do a significant investment in teacher training in the last institution and the current institution as well. I would say that we had challenges with independent learning time, where the children, even though teacher was sitting there, the child wanted to talk about something. So you can't now tell the child that learning is more important than your well-being. It's okay if the child hasn't done work one day; it'll happen the next day. So I think it's not a compliance, but it's a lifelong habit which you have to instill, and it can't just happen in pandemic. It has to continue beyond pandemic, and it has to trickle down not only just from the school but also from home front. So it's a partnership where the work ethics, what we talk about in corporate sector, needs to instill in children over a period of time by family and by school together in partnership.
Yeah, if I could add to that, I think for us at 21K, I mean, though we had evaluated Century when we started, but we just had 300 students. So we thought we'd focus on the other things. And the next year, when we scaled up to 3,000 students, we looked at Century to enhance the independent learning. So what it did two things. One, it freed the time of teachers in terms of preparing the enrichment classes or the remedial classes, and gave a lot of data-driven instruction and access to the students' performance, which helped the teachers also to plan the lessons in a much better way. I think the Century platform has been fantastic for us to drive the independent learning for all our students as well.
I wonder if there's one more question in the chat that may be fairly quick to answer. I wonder if, Veronica, you could answer this one. Were students given their devices by the school, or did they have their own?
Students had their own device. We had a practice of having iPads for students because we had all our books as e-books, and we had an LMS system also going on before the pandemic. So students have their own device. So all our students owned an iPad.
Okay, great, thank you. And there's another question from Mukul, which I think it would be interesting to hear from everyone on this one. I think all of you will have a slightly different but interesting insight. Which technologies and areas of innovation are here to stay, particularly thinking about technologies that help personalize learning for students?
So I can take that up. So I personally believe, I think none of the Century, the technologies are here to stay, because I think it's a fast-paced world and things are evolving so fast, right? I mean, had the pandemic not struck, you would not have looked at Century Tech as a platform, getting LMS, Zoom. I mean, today I know for sure, a lot of schools would definitely plan to have EPTMs. Even when the things get normalized as well. So some of the things will get integrated. I think it's very contextual, but having Zoom, Kahoot, quizzes, learning platforms, games, using Khan Academy apps and others are definitely going to stay, whether it's in person or online classes and other things. But things would definitely get evolved. I mean, we could look at Zoom itself as an interface. I mean, what it was 2 years back and compared to what features now it provides for the teachers in terms of the classroom management, it's a huge difference. So definitely change is going to be very constant, and technology is evolving much faster than probably what we could think.
So I think adding to what Yashwant also said, that I think there are a lot of practices which are good and kinder on the environment. I think PT meets used to be challenging for us as well, and now the parents can add their own through a learning management system. Parents can choose the slot, the day, and everything else. The teachers keep it free. So I think those kind of things. And I think another effective method would be probably barring the board classes or the classes which take high-stake examinations. I would say examination should be just moved online. Right, there is so much of efficacy of time which can be utilized in teachers, rather than supervising and sort of spending so much of time, can effectively use that time for lesson planning and enhancing their own skills. That's going to be staying on, and blended form of learning is going to be here. I would still say that the lessons we've learned from pandemic shouldn't just go in waste just because we think we are inching towards normal. So I think all schools should come up with a solution where at least once a week, everything is online. Individualized and personalized learning has different connotations. I don't want to get into that aspects, but I think the technology has to make more progress in enabling a teacher to personalize learning. It's a good start to begin with, but it's here to stay.
Yeah, I think I agree with both Yash and Samir, because as Yash mentioned, it will evolve. There's no doubt about it. It'll change. It'll get adapted. However, I think till date, what we've been doing is we've used technology as a standby or as just something we do additionally. We've not actually made it part of our daily in and out. And I think as Samir mentioned, that's exactly what we should look at. We've actually strengthened our relationship with technology over the last year and a half, and this relationship should continue to be nurtured and grown, and blended learning definitely will stay. So just a little example of what the thought process, how it's changed. We have PYP exhibitions in grade 5. So in 2019, it was completely physical because we were in school. In 2020, because we went to in the virtual remote learning, it was completely virtual. And now in 2021, we're looking at doing it in the blended form. Even though children are allowed to come to school, we can have those gatherings, but our mindsets have changed. We now want to do a blended, hybrid version of even events. So because, for example, I have grandparents across the world, and because if we were remote, this having an event online allowed that grandparent sitting in the US or in another part of the world to actually be a part. So I think this understanding of using virtual blended learning should continue to happen. And I think that's really going to remove any boundaries that we have, because that's the beauty of education. It technically has no boundaries. So I think we should leverage technology completely.
And since it's going to be, it's in line with the future of work also, right?
Yeah. As I agree with Vineet that parents and grandparents who are remote out of the country also could participate in events and all. And for personalized learning, basic thing which we found was Century Tech was of real help. And of course, we were using Century before the pandemic also. So our students already knew it, and the nuggets and all, our teachers could develop more and more things on it. And it did help to even track students' progress very well, which added to the learning. And of course, as Mr. Yashwant mentioned, there were quizzes and Kahoots and all, which kept everybody live. There were gizmos which also gave lots of opportunities for exploration. The virtual labs helped a lot, and it was, of course, not a replacement of the physical lab, but it gave more space to even see situations which could not be created in a lab. The students enjoyed all this. Padlet was of great help to do one lesson at a time, and also supported collaboration a lot. So Padlet was of great help in this entire situation.
I think one word which probably if you Google may show up almost 140 million times is asynchronous learning is here to stay. What children can learn on their own, they should learn on their own. The classroom is for interaction and discussions, and not for a teacher to become sage on the stage and deliver the content in the classroom. So that's definitely going to change. And I see already a paradigm shift which has happened in teachers. They just assign children to sort of do their units at home and come back and have discussions and flip classrooms. Collaboration is going to multifold increase collaborative learning, because if we're going to be staying in the hybrid model or probably virtual learning, children need to interact with each other. They need to develop social skills. So collaborative assessments is going to be another way forward. So.
Samir, I really like that point that you just made, and it links actually quite nicely to two fairly linked questions in the chat about the role of the teacher. So what you're describing really is that, school should be a time for face-to-face interaction and, addressing misconceptions rather than just delivering information. So I'm going to try and kind of combine these questions and see if any of you would like to comment on your thoughts. So one is about educational institutions today and how they build a sense of belonging with the teachers. But then the other is about, with so many apps and tools available, are we at risk of alienating the teachers? And I think these questions both speak to kind of managing the workload of the teacher, but in partnership with allowing them to have these tools that free up their time. And so kind of how do you navigate that balance?
Probably this is my favorite topic, and I keep asking because there's a international school in India, which has sort of introduced a robotic teacher, and everybody keeps asking this question. I think a teacher who can be replaced by technology should be replaced. That's one thing. So if a teacher who cannot adapt to technology should be replaced, definitely. But I think if you look at a World Economic Forum report, Future of Skills 2020, it's a very interesting and detailed report, and all educators must look at that report. When we're talking about skills of empathy, self-management, leadership, decision-making for the future are going to be the critical things to do. I know critical thinking, collaboration, communication, they're, I think, thoroughly used and abused words. But I think in the gamut of all these words, what is interesting to see is that all that an engineer does probably a doctor does can be automated, but what a teacher does may not be automated, because for that you need a human interaction. So I think we are far from teacher being replaced by automation or technology. And if a teacher who's ready to be replaced should be replaced immediately. Thank you. I'm going to get a lot of hate mails today, but yes.
No, but I think that's a very interesting take on the fact that, yes, I do agree to this fact that teachers, you can't just replace, because they do give, they instill empathy, they teach compassion, the care that a child will get from a teacher. They can't get the same from any robot or any kind of technology. However, yes, if that teacher can be replaced by technology, if you're just comparing two things, that means she's not doing a very good job. That's a fact. And you need to look into that. However, in this current pandemic and the way technology has worked, I think the role has changed drastically from just a teacher, as we've been discussing, somebody who's standing on the stage and just delivering, to somebody who's in the corner and actually just taking it around. How can you ensure learning happens individually, personalized? At the same time, she's not the sole owner of a class. I think that's the change, the swift change that teachers need to look into if they haven't yet done that. And I don't think so we'll be able to replace teachers, not in the early or the primary at all. That's what I feel. Even in secondary, there's so many things you can't just, you can look them up, but you may never find what they really mean. I'm sure that when we look at the workload and how it's changed, if we leverage what we've learned more smartly, their work gets more efficient and not reduced.
Oh, no, absolutely. I don't think the teachers can ever be replaced. Whether it's a good or bad teacher, I think the teacher's role is significant. And I believe the teacher's empathy is what drives natural and artificial intelligence. So that will always be there. But what can be automated is like data-driven instructions, reducing the clutter around the teacher's role, bringing in data analysts, data scientists, having a CTO in the schools are going to be a commonplace. And I think there's a lot more that can be digitized to simply reduce the burden of a teacher, so that the focus is on the learning outcomes rather than just collecting data around marks and leaves and other things. I think that definitely should be automated. Yeah.
I think teachers should be supported with a lot of clerical work we end up doing by technology, and that's what I think Yashwant is talking about, to free up that time for effective teaching and learning.
Yeah,
I definitely agree that we cannot replace teachers. Teachers are a must. Yes, it is not now that teachers have to keep on teaching. The chalkboard method is already just gone. So teachers are just facilitators, and a facilitator is required for the young minds. Otherwise, the young minds will be led to what we would not want them to work towards. So that's the reason why a teacher is required. The way a parent is required, a teacher is required.
Yeah. The supplemental learning can be digitized, but not the core of the K-12 school. Yeah.
I'm so sorry to cut across what is turning into a really controversial, really interesting discussion. I think we're all circling around a similar point, which is that the teacher can't be fully replaced, but that their work can be supplemented. And for those in the audience who may want to continue this conversation, because we're at the end of our allotted panel time at the moment, you can follow along on social media with the hashtag IFLS21 if you do want to continue that conversation. But what I would really like to do now is just thank all of our panelists today for their fascinating insights and a really lively discussion. I hope that everyone in the audience has got as much out of it as I certainly have. So thank you to all of you. Thank you, Samir. Thank you, Vineet. Thank you, Veronica. And thank you, Yashwant.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Wonderful. And just echoing Helen, thank you so much. I don't know about the audience, but I certainly feel inspired and invigorated by this wonderful discussion. What a fantastic Thursday this is turning out to be. So thank you again on behalf of Century to all of our panelists then. We're now at the stage of the agenda where we're going to take a short break. So go and grab yourself a cup of tea or a glass of water or whatever it is. We're going to have a 10-minute break and come back at 2:30 IST. And we've got a fantastic lineup for later this afternoon. So we're going to hear from Century's CEO and founder, Priya Lakhani, during her keynote address. And then we're going to have another panel discussion looking at the future of assessment, a really important topic that was touched a little bit upon in the previous panel. And then we're finally going to have our closing keynote from Brian Cooklin of Oak Ridge and North Anglia Education. So a brilliant lineup for this afternoon, but you have now 7 minutes to grab your cup of tea. We'll see you back at 2:30. Thank you very much. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Indian Future Learning Summit. I'm Charles Wood, and I am your host today. I hope you managed to get a cup of tea or a drink and have a little break before we resume the exciting agenda this afternoon. For those of you who are on social media, there are a couple of Twitter handles below. So this is Century, and we're using the hashtag IFLS21. So please do follow the conversation on social media as well. There's a fantastic discussion going on around innovation and the future of assessment, which we're all really excited about. But it's now my great pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker for this afternoon. We call her our boss, but Priya Lakhani, OBE, is the founder, CEO of Century Tech, the company we all work for, and the award-winning artificially intelligent education company. So Century is the global leader in AI-powered learning tools for schools and families working in dozens of countries across the world. And you've heard from many of those schools today and the use they've made of that technology. In 2008, Priya left her career as a barrister to launch a successful food cooking sauce business, which through her charitable foundation provided millions of meals and thousands of vaccinations to the underprivileged in India and in Africa, as well as funding several schools. Priya was awarded Business Entrepreneur of the Year by the Chancellor in 2009 and Officer of the Order of the British Empire in 2014. She was recently appointed as a non-executive board member of the UK's government's Department for Digital Culture, Media and Sport. So it's my absolute pleasure to introduce Priya Lakhani to you, who's going to be delivering this afternoon keynote. Priya, wonderful to have you here. Over to you.
Thanks so much, Charles. When you said artificially intelligent, I thought you were going to say artificially intelligent boss, and I thought that we'll have to discuss that later. I am so delighted to be here today. I'm just really sorry that it's not face to face. I'm a very proud NRI, and so I wish I was in India with many of you face to face. So why don't we set it as a goal to make that happen once things settle down? And I'm really proud that Century Tech is hosting the inaugural Indian Future Learning Summit. It's absolutely incredible to see all of you here. So India is home to 1/6 of the world's population. So a quarter of India's population, as you know, is under 14 years old, and half of the country's population is below the age of 25. The median age in India is currently just 28.4 years, and that means great potential for India's future, but it also poses many risks. And so I wanted to start with really a bit of a kind of call to action, because we have a choice and we must act. Because on the one hand, if you think about that median age, if properly harnessed, the boom in young people could see India surge to new levels of prosperity. But on the other hand, without proper innovation, without care, it could instead lead to increasing poverty and unemployment, which I know no one wants to see. And what we do understand is that education plays a really, really big part in this. A great baseline education for every child is absolutely essential. However, even today, as we know, education remains out of reach for so many Indian children, particularly in rural areas. A 2019 survey that we looked at of rural Indian areas showed that after 5 years of schooling, so 5 years of being at school and having access to education, at 10 to 11 years old, only half of pupils could read a text written for 7 to 8-year-olds. The results for arithmetic ability also told a very similar story. with only 28% of 10 to 11-year-olds able to solve simple division questions compared with 37% in 2008. And on top of this, we all know what's happened in the past 12 to 18 months. We've had a huge disruption with the pandemic and disrupted learning for so many students. And that's particularly damaged the education of children in areas with little access to technology or the internet. And this is where I see this talk as being so important in terms of this summit and all of you being together, because clearly we have some real innovators and pioneers in India that I know that we've been working with, and we're really, really proud to be discussing all of these issues with you. But naturally, what's happened in the last 18 months is that it's disproportionately disadvantaged those children in those rural areas of India, or particularly children without access to any sort of technology. Now, I'm an incredibly proud Indian. I don't know how many times I can fit that in within this 15-minute talk. And I'm incredibly passionate about these issues. And I just thought, just to give you an idea of where that's come from, I'd tell you a little bit about the Century story, which started about 8 years ago. So 8 years ago, as Charles said, I was running a food company called Masala. So I had brought karai, shahi, dal, all these sorts of sauces into the UK under a Fresh Sauces brand. And we were selling that into supermarkets. We made a pledge with Masala from day one. So rather than most companies about a decade ago that said every time we produce something, we're going to take the profits and we're going to take a portion of profits and give those to charity. Actually, from day one, we said for every pot of sauce that we sell, we're going to feed a homeless person a hot meal, we're going to provide vaccines to children, and we're going to focus on building schools and really focus on education. We had served up around 3 million meals, and most of those meals were actually in India, and particularly around the areas of, for example, Tamil Nadu and around Mumbai, in the outskirts of Mumbai. We had supplied about 35,000 pentavalent vaccines to help children be able to survive 5 of the biggest killers across Africa. And the schools that we were focused on were in India. And I remember visiting the Daveri in the slums of Mumbai and being able to essentially support these NGOs who used to buy buses, and the buses would have a curtain in the middle so that during monsoon season, the kids could go into the bus and they could still study, and had a whiteboard or a blackboard at each end of the bus and they could learn. And so this is what we were doing. And it happened from day one. We had about 10 schools that we were supporting as well. But I also, at the same time in the UK, got onto the advisory board for the Secretary of State for Business, Innovation and Skills. And they were very focused on the skills piece. And in one of the meetings, a minister walked in and said that 20% of the UK cannot read, write or do maths well enough to get a decent job at the end of education. And I thought, I know India very well, and I know these parts of Africa that we're supporting too, because my parents moved from Gujarat, from Porbandar, and they took that long steamship and they moved to Mombasa. So we understand East Africa quite well and how it works. And what I do know is that these countries, as Commonwealth countries, often replicate the same sort of methodology of teaching and learning, particularly in the poorer areas, as they do in Britain. So if it's not working in Britain, then this sort of delivery of education is not really going to be as effective anywhere else either. And so when I learned that, I decided that rather than just simply throwing money away in a sense, and yes, okay, it has some use, but I wanted to create a sustainable change. And I know that I see eye to eye with many educators, because when someone gets into education, they want to see a legacy, they want to see sustainable change, and they want to give opportunity and choice to all these children. So I went to schools, I researched them, and I went to some of the best schools in the country. I went to some of the most challenged schools in the country. And what I could see was that there were similar issues, despite every child, every parent, and every school being different, 2 issues that were very, very similar on the front line of education. The one-size-fits-all delivery of education still existed. So teachers standing at the front, talking to a group of students. Teachers want to differentiate and personalise for every child, but that's nearly impossible to do when you have 20, 30, 40 of them in front of you, even with a teaching assistant who's fantastic. And also I could see that teachers were spending most of their time giving out little tests at the end of the week, marking them, becoming data analysts, right? Trying to figure out who doesn't understand what, why don't they understand what? And that takes a lot of teachers' time. So 60% of a teacher's time was spent marking, assessing, and trying to figure out in the next class, rather than actually teaching, which is what they signed up to do. Now, what we also know is that teachers are the single most important factor in the delivery of a good education. But India, and if we look at India, has long struggled with an acute shortage of qualified educators. You have 213,608 vacant teacher posts just pre-COVID. Access to education is increasing, and we know that, but significant gaps still remain. And focusing on that teacher point is incredibly important. What we do understand is that every additional year of schooling in India is estimated to result in about 8% higher wages. So we looked at all of that. We looked at that information. We went to schools, and the century story began. So we decided that what we wanted to do was look at technology. Technology had transformed every single sector in the world. I mean, think about it. Think about what's on your mobile phone, and I know being a keen and frequent visitor to parts of India, that, mobile is actually pretty prevalent all over the place, right? We use WhatsApp a lot, messaging. Think about all the technology and the apps on your phone. Think about how technology and apps, but how they're used, how they can actually help you make better decisions in terms of where you save your money, where you invest, where you go on holiday, where you shop, what you watch, what you buy. It's transformed all those sectors. In enterprise, so in business, technology allows people to make better decisions, more accurate decisions, right? It makes you far more efficient. So the question is, why on earth had we not used that same sort of technology in the education sector? Now, it's not about retrofitting technology into education and squeezing it in somehow, but it's about focusing on those two big problems. The one-size-fits-all delivery of education. We must differentiate for every child. We must offer every child what they need at the point of time. And we must superpower those teachers who are the single most important factor. We must empower them with the right interventions and information so they can make timely, targeted interventions and essentially make them the superheroes and lift them up on that pedestal that we absolutely should be doing. And so by looking at that and thinking about the goals of educators, they haven't changed. You want to improve outcomes. You want to increase efficacy in learning. You want to differentiate for every child. You want to personalize. You want to give everyone high quality resources. You want to give children access to education within the classroom and also extend it outside of the classroom. You want that concept of family learning as well, where parents can be more involved in their child's education. And there is no better country, I say, than India to be able to do that, because our culture, when it comes to education, is so strong. And so how can we do that? So we built a machine that could learn how children learn. And it does use very advanced, very complex technology, and it takes years to build, but it's there now. And what I'm so proud of today is that we have a group of pioneers in this conference, in this virtual conference, to discuss how they're using this technology, sort of case study, so that we can build a set of pioneers and we can go beyond that in India and allow that expertise and that know-how to really thrive within the country. So it's about using digital content, and we understand that this digital content can be a powerful opportunity to help to bridge those remaining gaps in access and improve those learning outcomes for every child that you have taken within your care at that school. Content that's tailored to the individual student. It can help improve retention, improve engagement, and most importantly, those learning outcomes, which we know is so important as an asset and a currency. So there's a lot to think about. We're also very keen to talk about ethics of AI and ethics of technology at Century, and maybe that could be part of one of Charles's sessions in the next year when we do this summit next time. I'd love to talk about that. We've certainly been in the world's largest EdTech experiment for the last 12 to 18 months. Lots of issues that I'm so proud that are being discussed today in some panels. You've got some incredible Century senior leaders also who are chairing these panels, for example, on assessment. What is the future of assessment? What have you seen in India over the last 12 to 18 months where actually is assessment really providing what you want it to provide for the children in your care in your schools? Or could it look a little bit different? What about a holistic education? What you all actually work so hard to achieve in your schools? How can technology start to bridge that gap between assessment just being that currency and that set of grades to actually much more of a holistic picture of what children are achieving in terms of skills, as well as the knowledge that you provide? So I'm really excited to be listening to what comes out in the panel in a later session. But thinking about the goals, thinking about what we're trying to achieve, that is what Century is here for. Century is here as a business, we are actually a social enterprise. So we really do focus on impact and outcomes of children, but we're here to serve you. So any Indians out there, and I really, really can't wait to visit you and to meet you, but if there is any way in which you see how we can help you to serve your teachers, to serve your children, to serve your communities and your parents in a way in which we can help to improve and achieve those goals even faster, then we are here certainly to serve you. So I'm delighted that we have so many pioneers in India ready today to debate so many issues. I know that you've already had a little bit of today to kick off all of this, and I was so proud to be able to take 15 minutes of your time and steal it today to speak to all of you. But I really look forward to seeing you all in person. I really, really hope that you will continue to be safe, your families too, and that we get through this crisis and we can see each other in person in the next year. Thank you so much, Charles, and thank you everyone.
Thank you, Priya, for that delivery. And I think someone in the audience actually summed this up really well. Nellie No said, teachers are the key to quality education globally. Thank you for focusing on this. And I couldn't agree more, Nellie. And I think that's hopefully what's being highlighted today, recognizing the fantastic work of teachers that has occurred over the past 18 months and beyond, and then looking forward to the future and actually defining what that role of a teacher is, that human element, which is so important to education. So thank you very much, Priya. And as you mentioned, we're now moving on to a fascinating area of discussion, the future of assessment. And we think that this is a hugely important topic. High stakes assessment has been thrown into array with distance learning and the inability to conduct such high stakes assessments. There's never been more of a focus on the power and importance of formative assessment as learning. So we're hugely privileged to have a group of experts, senior experts from across India, representing different schools, who are going to unpick this incredibly complex but interesting topic as part of the panel discussion. Before I introduce our host, let me just remind you that we have a chat functionality and a Q&A functionality. So if you have any specific questions around assessment, or if you'd like to share any of your expertise or experiences that you've had of assessment over the past 18 months, please do speak up, share in the chat box, ask your questions, and we'll be more than happy to try and get round to those. But it is my absolute pleasure to introduce my wonderful colleague, Dr. Alison Triggs, who is one of our science curriculum leads here at Century Tech. And Alison is going to introduce her panel and take this session on the future of assessment. Alison, over to you.
Thank you so much. I'm very sorry, I'm just going to cough. So welcome to everyone. As Charles said, I'm Alison Triggs and I lead the science team here at Century. Just a tiny bit of background about me. It's in evolutionary ecology, which, for anybody that's not sure, it essentially means examining the evolution of interactions between and within species. So things like pathogen and host interactions, which has been very topical in the last couple of years. So it gives me great pleasure to host the panel today, where we're going to be covering different types of assessment and how schools have started to move beyond summative and high stake assessment. And how we meaningfully assess and monitor learning has always been really close to my heart. And the pandemic has brought particular challenges to everybody in this area. We're now at an important point in history, and it's vital that we reflect on the lessons that we have learned over the last years. To this end, we are extremely lucky to be joined by an impressive group of educators with decades and decades of experience between them, and so many qualifications and awards. We would be here all day if I listed them all. So firstly, I'd just like to introduce Priya Matthew. She is the Senior Executive Coordinator at Podar International School, and she's particularly passionate about holistic, rigorous, inclusive education with no child left behind. So good afternoon, Priya.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, all.
It's wonderful to have you. So next, I would like to introduce Venkata Suresh Lulla. He's a head of school at Velistus International School and has led exemplary practices across all areas of teaching, learning and assessment, and specialises in implementing project and problem-based learning. So thank you very much for joining us, Venkata.
Good afternoon, everyone, and a very happy Dashara to all of you.
Sanchita Raha is the principal at Chirek International School and recently worked closely with 200 young women from 16 nations as director of a pre-undergraduate preparatory program at the Asian University for Women, with the aim to empower them to become the future voices of their community. So welcome, Sanchita. Thank you so much for being here with us this afternoon.
Thank you, Dr. Allison, for having me here.
We're very lucky to have everybody here, so thank you for joining us. Surjit Singh Rana is the acting headmaster at King's College, India. In his teaching career, he worked in various educational roles and holds postgraduate qualifications in English, technology and education. He's also a published author covering computer science and technology, among lots of other things. So thank you for being part of this panel, Surjit. Yeah. Dipti Deva is a mathematics facilitator at Oak Ridge International School, as well as being a remarkable mathematician. She also holds a master's in computer application and a bachelor's in education in math and computer science, and is also a qualified CTET. So welcome, Dipti, and thank you for joining us.
Good afternoon, everyone.
One little piece of admin before we continue. During the discussion, please do ask questions for our panelists using the Q&A feature. We will have time to address these later on. So my very first question is to the whole panel. How did you approach assessment during the pandemic? What lessons have you learned? What are you going to carry forwards? And Venkata is first on my screen, so could we start with you?
Thank you, Alison. That was a very difficult question. And I'm sure all of us will give you unique answers because each one of us had a different challenge. When it comes to this challenge with us, we were a new school, totally new school, and the cohort that we had were absolutely new. So firstly, in order to understand kids, what are their baselines was the biggest challenge for us, even to plan and initiate teaching and learning. Century has actually offered us a very, very interesting insights initially through planning, basically, more than assessments. Right, because we could actually implement the diagnostic assessments and then see how kids were, in various concepts and accordingly plan our learning. And mostly we were focusing on reviewing what these kids have learned, online. Was it really effective or not? More than looking at the attainment end of the year or grades. It was basically focused on whether this online teaching and learning was effective or not. So that was one big challenge for us. And then Century has actually helped us a lot, as a planning tool and of course as an implementation tool as well.
Thank you so much for that. Surjit, you are next on my screen. Would you like to answer that question for us? I can repeat it if you need me to.
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you perfectly.
Yes. So, Dr. Allison, for us, when we come to know first time that we won't be able to, open the school in March 2020, we thought of designing our own online learning platform. And that was a time we had a 1 month off. Actually, it was a break time for us, so session break time for us. So we designed an online learning platform, and all the students from early years to seniors who started taking their online classes on the platform. So it was not very difficult for us because shifting from the teaching learning to new platform was not very difficult because the teachers had idea about the things, and when we were designing the platform, all were involved in it. So they come to know that how to go about it. But yes, your question is about assessments. So in April 2020, all the students and teachers, they started taking their classes online, and it was a smooth transition for the teaching and learning process. But after a month of our online classes, it was time for the assessments, and again a new challenge now. How to make the assessment fair and which can give us the information where the teacher's interventions may help. So we tried many methods. for the internal assessment. And it's not only internal assessment. That was the time when we were expected to do the assessment for the board classes also, because the Cambridge expected from the schools to provide the school assessed grades. So we took the help of the parents. We when the students were writing the exam, first we expected the parents to sit with the students and supervise them. Then we thought of start recording the sessions of the assessments. So we were expecting students that when they are writing the exam, so they are on the Google Meet, so their camera should be adjusted in such a way that they are visible and their script is visible, their table on which they are sitting to write the assessment, that should be visible. So that also we tried. We tried many technology tools. So for that we changed the format of assessment. We thought let's try to change the format of assessment. So we use the technology tools to have the visible and quick evidence of our learning. So some of the tools I'll just mention here. We used Moodle to automate the assessment process. We use Flipgrid to it helps to facilitate the discussions. So in place of just writing the taking the assessment as a written examination, we try to use different tools and different ways to make it. So there was one, Adobe Spark was there to create the content, and of course Kahoot was there, then ExamNet was there. So these all tools, these all methods help us to manage academically honest exam to a good extent.
Thank you so much for that. Prema, you are next on my screen. How have you approached assessment over the last few years?
Yeah, when the lockdown was announced in March, it was the end. It was the end of our academic year too. And it was just a gap of 5 days that we got to plan what do we do. And then it was announced that there will be a total lockdown. So we just had a meeting of the leadership team and we just found out what resources do we have and what can we do. So first we took our own policy of assessment to check what do we tell the parents. So it was very clear since 2011, we have been using technology in teaching and learning and assessment in a big way. Of course, we started integrating Century into the assessment process from 2017. So we just had to streamline the whole process on, write it down and share with the parents. That was all that we had to do. So we quickly made a document on what do we do with regard to assessment, because assessment is always a crisis for students and parents. And in a crisis situation, what is assessment meant for anyone? So how do we make it easy? How do we take care of the well-being of the students? So when we use technology, we had been using technology in school a lot. I have told that since 2011, children are having iPad in the school. So parents are well aware of it when they take admission in the school that they need to have an iPad. And we use technology practically in all classes. Irrespective of any, even an art class will use technology. So it was much easier for us to plan and to communicate to parents. Actually, our real challenge was in 2017. It was not 2020, when we had just introduced assessment as learning using Century. So that was our challenge in 2017, but it was a very smooth process for us. We had to only put when are we assessing, how are we assessing, and how do we report to the parents. These are the three things that we had to just plan it and document and let them know about it. So it went on very smooth.
Fabulous. I'm glad it went so smoothly for you guys. Dipti, what was your experience in the pandemic of assessment?
So we also went online as everyone in the month of March 2020. But our assessments were always student-centered. So the focus was always developing the concept and assessing it. So our objectives did not change. Only the platform changed. For example, some of the summative tasks required group discussion. So now this discussion or presentation needed children to work in clusters because our platform was MS Teams. So Teams gave us the facility of breakout rooms, which the teachers could easily monitor. So this aspect was taken care of by technology. Also, we did not cut down on the syllabus. So I remember one unit 4 was left when we went for a total lockdown. So instead of going into linear thinking, we went multi-directional. For example, in math, statistics unit, we gave a research task, project-based learning. So in that way, it was like always student-driven. And therefore, they could represent, analyze, reflect. Everything was done by the students. So they were pretty self-driven. And yes, I would say that FAs we conducted using quizzes, Kahoot, Padlet. Century Tech is new in our school, but it helped a lot. Like for the last 2 months, I've been using, and it's a great tool for FA. So that's it.
Thank you, and I'm glad that Century has been able to help you out in the last few months. Sanchita, so how has your experience been through the pandemic of assessment?
Our school also uses Teams, like what Dipti has said. And we did not really juggle with different platforms from, I think, 23rd of March, the lockdown started. And we started our online classes almost immediately without actually wasting a single day. And this was possible because the school already had a system in place as far as technology is concerned, and this is used in regular classroom teaching learning. We have the interactive, we had, and we still do, the interactive panels, or classes have got the LCD projectors. So this is used quite regularly and in regular classroom teaching. But coming to your specific question regarding assessments, we used the Microsoft Teams again. It was the forms, it was, which were used for MCQ, for short subjective answer questions, for the quiz. Apart from that, we also used Kahoot. We also used, there were, Pear Deck, which was aligned with Teams. So these things made it easy. But one thing is that our teachers really come up with a huge array of formative assessments. So it could be anything. It could be a class discussion, it could be an essay, it could be a project-based learning, it could be experimental investigations, field work, or group and individual, oral presentations, then commentaries, multimedia presentations, online discussions, breakout rooms, and collaboration. So we used all these things to assess student learning, and even open book exams was something that we had in order to ensure the validity and the credibility of the examination that we were conducting. Yes, we did have all those, you see the camera being focused on the student at the time of summative assessment, but we felt that summative assessment is not the only examination that is going to enable us to measure the students' learning outcomes and the skills that the student has developed. So we had the formative assessments played a very important role in this.
Thank you ever so much. It's so everyone has so much experience to share, and it's really interesting listening to everybody. A few people touched on it, but I'd be really interested to know how your students feel about assessment, sort of during the pandemic, after the pandemic. How have they how have they approached it? Has anything about their feelings towards it changed? I can see Prema wants to answer, so off you go.
Yeah, that's a very good question. Students are very keen. How are they going to be assessed? Definitely. So we have a system of formative assessment, which has a lot of technology integrated into the assessment. We use Century in a big way. All the nuggets are being used. Teachers also create nuggets from what would they feel that is important. So that is also a practice that we followed. So we had to tell them that the formative assessment will go on as it is. So there was no question of academic integrity being hampered. We could track the students well. So there was a big relief for the students, but we had challenge with students who have joined from other schools and the teachers who have joined new. So what we had done is we have a team of IT experts who would train the students as soon as they join the school for a week along with the teachers. And we have a buddy system for students as well as for teachers. So this system has really helped to settle the students who are joining new. And there was a person 24/7 available to them. At any point they would need help. That person was accessible, and children could, all teachers could solve their problems. Over and above, the IT team was a big support. So the students felt it quite smooth. And the new system that is added, the sticks which is added to Century, those who have, used it before and now those who have come up, children were very happy to know that they would get an assessment report from after doing their nuggets. That was a very good thing that they noticed. And they really appreciated that. So thank you for that. And students felt at ease, but they were always doubtful about what is a summative task going to be. How will it look? Will it be a written exam? Or will it be, what is the school going to do? So that was a task. So definitely we used the exam.net for the term end exam, where they would write and they would submit their papers. So we got a blended way of getting the students assessed, and the students are doing excellently well. So that we come to know in our discussions with students. So our students got settled in just 1 month, and once the parents were aware that this is what we are doing, and we have very good communications with parents. So daily a circular would go. The only challenge was the people who are organizing, the teachers, had to write more instructions than the questions. There would be a page of instructions, and then the question would be hardly anything. So that was a change that we have seen in the way the question papers were set. 2-page instruction and 1-page questions. So that was it. And the students felt good, and every teacher would keep repeating that instruction. So it went smooth and nice, though in the beginning, children were worried about how are the summative going to be. Thank you.
I don't know who wants to jump in next. There's quite a few people that want to say something, so just jump in.
Yeah, should I?
Okay.
I'm sorry. You please go ahead. I'll wait. No problem.
Thank you so much. So for us, students already had laptops before pandemic also in higher grades. So technology was never an issue. And also kids are very fast learners, that we all know. So in our school, the pace of learning was pretty good. And also the e-assessment, the grade 10 exam also happened, which did not happen for other curriculum, but it happened for MYP. And the results were pretty good. Our assessments happen in a platform called AssessPrep for grade 9 and 10, which ensure high security browser. Also, for DP, it is on exam.net. So academic honesty was taken care of, but we always have to say cameras on, just as a reminder. So it was pretty smooth for us.
Okay, so our case was very different. Like I was telling you, we were a new school when the pandemic started. The most amazing thing that I noticed in my 20 years of teaching is that when this online learning started, kids were very excited initially with the techniques that we used. But, I did notice after 3-4 weeks, that level of interest has started fizzling down. That's when we realized that, see, look, we can't have a stable system, throughout the year and say, we'll do only this way. So that's when we decided we would change the system of evaluation once every 3 months, just to, encourage kids through different techniques, through different methods, and ensure that they get, joy while solving. Because I'm sure you all agree with me, kids are at comfort zones at home, and we can't expect them to be with the same degree of seriousness as they are in school. So this was one challenging thing. I mean, the same thing goes with Century. Initially, when we introduced it, they were super excited. But then later, when we noticed that they started losing out interest, so we had to come up with different strategies to, tell them that, look, you need to spend sufficient time to learn and then solve. So what we try to do throughout the year is, we are trying to help you to learn. Assessment is a learning tool. It's only a feedback mechanism kind of a thing. Also, the other thing which came up from my students was, could the school send physical question papers for them to write, because we're a Cambridge International School, and the papers are quite different when that comes up to a national school. So we took that as a nice input, and then we did share. And with the trust of the parents, these assessments were implemented at home. Kids did enjoy that a lot. One last thing is, there was also a demand from kids, that can teachers ask them orally questions, because they were missing interventions of adults talking to them other than their own parents. So we did that as well, so it was really very an interesting experience for us.
Yeah, for us, students are comfortable with the methods of assessment, whatever we adopted. But what we notice is that there's a huge learning gaps, and the students and teacher both are struggling with from where to start. So teachers need to find the ways to assess the students early, not only the summative assessment. It can be a type of formative assessment. It can be formally or informal type of assessments, which will help the students and teachers to understand that from where to start actually. We teachers now we are facing this. We are already in short of instructional time, and using different technology tools may help us to do most of our assessment during the non-instructional time, because students just joined the schools now, and it's a lot is there to cover. So if we can do these all assessments when the students are either at home or at on holiday or on during weekends, so that will give us time to spend time with the students in the classes, and we will be able to cover the maximum. And I hope students will be able to support the teachers with these assessments, and we will be able to cover the gaps.
May I come in?
Of course, please do.
In our case, while we were selecting the appropriate method of assessment, we gave due consideration to reliability, validity, and inclusivity, objectivity, and how practical it would be to implement these kinds of assessment. And another very important thing is, we also, for the higher classes, particularly the IB students and also the 9th and 10th graders, we involved them in the kind of formative assessments that they would like to have. So as a result of that, when they were designing, or they were a part of the assessment that was being designed for them, they were involved in it, and there was a lot of involvement. And you see, the methods that we use, again, its efficacy and effectivity was proved by our excellent, whether it was a physical pen and paper test, which happened during the March series of the Cambridge examination, and we had 75% of our entries were A stars and A's, which was one of the best results we've ever had. And so also for IB, which was a non-examination route, our students did very well because they had an average grade point average was 37 as compared to the world average of 33.02. So whether it was an examination route or a non-examination route, whatever we had adopted to assess our students really worked well, and this was proved by our outstanding results. Of course, the teachers played a very important role in this.
Thank you so much. We've got some questions coming in, so I would just like to ask a few of those. The first one is what the purpose of assessment within education should be. So why are we assessing students?
Can I come in here?
Of course, please do.
Yeah, students are assessed to assess and to gauge their learning outcomes, and also for the teachers whether the learning objectives have been met. It is feedback for our teaching, and also we get to know whether the students have met the learning objectives that we had set out to for them to achieve.
May I add to it?
Yes, please.
So assessment, generally the term refers to all those activities which teachers and students are doing to get the feedback which help us to modify our learning process. So it helps both teachers and students. For the teachers, it helps to understand who is getting the concept and who doesn't understand the lesson at all. What are the strengths of the students, and what are their needs? And a teacher understands that what all adjustment the teacher has to do to his instructions and also to the learning environment to support the students, and what different type of differentiation he or she need to prepare. So that is the part of the teachers which helps us, and the same way it alert the students also with their present position. It informs the students their desired goals, and it gives the students an understanding that how to get there. So basically these assessments have something for everyone, for all the stakeholders, in fact, including students, teachers, and we educationists, and of course the parents as well.
I think this is the most difficult question that someone has asked. As a teacher, if I were to answer this, there were a lot of occurrences that I had in my life so far where a child not performing so well, maybe in a summative or a formative assessment towards year-end grades, so-called the grade sheets that we give. But they ended up to be very, very successful young adults, in the community, going to even Ivy League universities. Always this has been a very difficult thing for me, to think about, what and how these have to be done. But then, these days when I always try to focus on one aspect, that an assessment has to be like a self-reflective tool. Now, also here, there's one very important thing. This self-reflection should be more on the positive angle, again, otherwise, we don't want to show a child that he's not capable, or, build some guilt kind of consciousness in him, because it doesn't help the child in any way then. So it should be like more of positive self-reflection for a child, to set his own milestones for his future. I think that's how it should be, because planning, teaching, learning, all that, definitely it's all there. And many learner adults before me have said that. Definitely, I agree to all those points. But I think this is one of the most essential thing.
May I add to Mr. Venkat? So, as educators, we should, design assessment in such a way that it should bring curiosity and enthusiasm among students. It need not always be a pen and paper test. We can give them some exploration task. So basically, along with assessing them, we can also enhance other skills like collaboration skill, social skill, time management. These skills are also so important in life. So we should plan our assessment that we are also addressing these skills instead of just grading the kids.
I agree with all of you, but I just want to add one more point. The feedback is most important than just assessing the students. That is very important. And, you know, what is the purpose of assessment? Is to tell me how much I know and to tell others how much I have learned. Can you identify the gaps in learning? Is the teacher doing that? In the real sense of it, are we really doing it in our schools? Every individual? Because every individual is different. When there was a paradigm shift on teaching strategies into inquiry-based learning, problem-based learning, case studies, so and so, but our assessment strategies remain the same. There would be a written exam in the term, there would be a final exam that decides whether you go to the next level or not. So that is something that is still not uniformly accepted by all across the country. It remains a challenge always. So until it is taken care, you know, the purpose of assessment is well understood by all. So it will be a challenge for the schools that we believe that the formative assessment is more important than summative assessment. But when they go out, how do they, prove themselves? So there is a challenge underlying it.
There's another question in the chat about the difference between assessment for learning and formative assessment. So for me, I feel like the words formative and summative are not necessarily types of assessment, they're more like conclusions that you can draw. So if a student does an assessment and gets 50% or whatever, you can be like, that's a summative conclusion, like that I've taken a snapshot. But if I look carefully at those results, I can then pick it apart and use that, and I have something to work with. So how do you feel, and how is it implemented in your school, that difference between assessment for learning and formative assessment?
Shall I?
It's quite a nuanced question, so yeah.
Assessment for learning is a part of, teaching. The assessment is a part of teaching. That is something that has to be accepted. So once you accept that, every unit has to be assessed. It is not that I learn all and then you assess. There is a reflection, there is a feedback, there is an assessment. Why do we assess? As I mentioned before, it is just to tell me that I have not understood this concept and I need to know more about it. It is for the teacher to know. So if that purpose is there, I think we will achieve our purpose.
In my opinion, I think subtly every teacher does this. When you step into a class, it could be a 30, 35 or 40 minutes lesson. You would use a lot of tools, right? Be it the questioning, be it be a task sheet, or be it your observation, to gauge the learning, how far the kids are able to move as per your objective, and then change the course of your teaching, and change the mood of the activities. I think this almost every teacher does it. But if you do it informed, then it's nice, then, when you do it with more awareness, you would be able to do a brilliant job.
True, I agree to Mr. Suresh. If you make things obvious to the students, what we feel, things will go good. Students and teachers, they will understand that, okay, here is something is done for assessment for learning. And then we will be ready for assessment of learning. If we have done it, assessment for learning in almost every lesson, if not almost every lesson, at least for every unit. So that helps us to prepare these students well for their summative assessments.
also, I think the formative assessments are actually nestled in the summative assessment, and it's a subset of the summative assessment. And I would, in this connection, I would just like to go back to what Ms. Prema said. Even though we, yes, end of the day, it's the final result that matters. But you see, yours is also an IB school, so you've seen how important the format, the internal assessments have been in the last 2 years, ever since the onset of the pandemic. And the internal assessments in IB actually focuses on each of the learner profile attributes. These are smaller skills that we look at developing in our students through these formative assessments. And again, throughout, even in your summative, formative assessments carry a weightage. So it cannot exist in isolation, neither summative nor formative,
Dipti, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, thank you so much. So FAs always lead to summatives, that we already know that. However, FAs allow the teacher and student, both of, it's both the direction, which direction the learning is happening. For teachers, like for educators, we will get to know that is there any specific area where common errors are made by, some percentage of the classroom. So the teaching pattern can be changed. And for students, they will also understand, okay, I need to work more in this specific area. So therefore, it is very important for both of us.
So this is a linked question kind of to what we were just discussing. So in her keynote, Priya mentioned, so is assessment really providing what we need from it? And we also have another question in the chat that says, do you feel that summative assessment is fit for purpose? So who would like to take that?
Like I said, it is extremely difficult to answer this question. And innumerable examples every teacher would have of those students who haven't performed well in summatives, who are very successful entrepreneurs, and then maybe, school owners, or it could be anything, right? But fortunately, past 1 to 2 decades, there has been a lot of changes in the assessment patterns in all the international boards, which is very welcoming. But I really wonder whether we are moving with the same pace which the industry is changing today, because the industry is changing much, much more faster than us. And also, thanks to the keynote speaker earlier, she did focus on the challenges which teachers have today. Because see, past 22 years I've been teaching. So initially, when we used to see about 3 to 4 levels of teaching in a classroom. But then if there are 20 students today in a classroom, there are 15 or 20 levels of, learners, so which is a very complicated situation. So, of course, I think we need good technology intervention tools like Century. And I think we should slightly move away from the regular trend of, this paper pen assessment, which is done only for 1 hour or 2 hours or 3 hours at the end of a year or a term, to much more refined form of a grading. I'm sure the policy makers at some point will take a wise call on this, because see, anything can happen for a child. Maybe he may be psychologically down on that day, but it doesn't clearly give his picture of his learning through that summative assessment. So I think this is something which we should all reflect upon.
Formative assessment is actually key to assessment. As we all know that the international boards accepted the grades of given by the school, how the student progressed over a period of time. So that was the biggest evidence against it, and the children really fared well, and they could map their own progress. So if the school believes in it, it will happen. So it is up to the school to take it forward, and formative as a part of learning and tracking students and building the gaps.
Also, I think the question is, does summative assessment fit the purpose? Depends on what the purpose is. I mean, the purpose should be very clear. The objective should be very clear. What are you setting out to achieve? So it's spread out over a longer period of time. So whatever the student has learned, what you wanted the student to know, or what should have been the student learning outcomes. So summative assessment would be doing that.
To add to this point, definitely students should also know the purpose of their learning. Why are they learning this? If that objective is clear, then they would, definitely take more interest instead of, just following the whole linear pattern. They will know why are they learning. That is actually very important. And then summative is also needed because instead of focusing on how much did I get, it should be like, where am I lagging, or which is my strength. And an educator plays a huge role. It should be like a feedback also should be given one-on-one, and it should be really motivating for as educators. We should motivate the kids, like, oh, you have done so well in this and this criteria, instead of focusing on their loopholes.
Linked to this, somebody has just posted, so Priyanka has just posted a question saying, asking for guidance on how to keep the flame of learning and writing ignited in our students. So she says that due to COVID, some interest has been lost in writing skills. Their speaking skills have enhanced, probably on all the Zooms that we've been doing and the MS Teams, but the writing skills have diminished. So how do we keep that love of learning and the writing skills going?
Yeah, I can just add on one point, to this very good question. And I think all of us are suffering from the same problem of writing skills.
I tried to write the other day and couldn't.
Yeah, what we tried through our school is involving parents. We involved the fathers, right? Of course, we all know moms are always very active and very honestly, work with kids. But then we wanted to engage kids with the dads and then make them do. So we came up with a system and a new policy where the dads work with kids and then send us creative writing tasks once in 2 weeks. It was a huge success, because they never did it earlier. So you can try something like this.
Yeah, I believe that's a good idea actually, because these days it's very difficult, for the students to make them write in their notebooks, and we have given the gadgets in their hands now, and everyone wants to do the things. They are so very comfortable working on online and then doing everything on Google folders and then managing everything online. So yes, this is area which we all actually need to see how to make them return to the writing part as well, because ultimately they have to write on paper and for the exams and all. Agree, we need to work on this one. And Suresh sir has given a good idea actually.
At our school, we do practice of children uploading every day what they write.
Okay.
The class is over, the child needs to click the page and upload it on MS Teams. So it goes as a good book for the teacher to see. So in the beginning, it was a task for us. They felt that immediately it has to be clicked and they need to go to the next class. So we kept a gap between the two classes. So we could see what they write. So it was like instructions. Keep your book, your pen ready. You need to write the points that are discussed in the class. So though we write, we use a lot of technology while learning. Lots are available now, n number of things. But children do write at least a page during the class on their own understanding of what they heard. So that has kept, and according to what we have seen now is the end of the first term, we are seeing good result. We are awaiting to see children have written with their pen on a paper and uploaded the paper. So we are very happy to see that almost all of them are above 80% marks. So it was a very successful practice that we integrated formative a lot with Century Tech during our teaching learning. See, there was a challenge using Century in the beginning to introduce it. But during the online classes, the challenge was different. Already the kids are on iPad and on laptop for 5 hours, and you give something more after the school hours, they would not do it. The parents wouldn't encourage it. They would say that that will add up to the screen time. So how do we solve it? So we came up with the policy of telling the teachers to spend 10 minutes of your last part of your class doing the assessment using technology in the class itself. So children who are keen and they wish to go forward will use it further, which the teacher can always monitor, but it would happen during the support classes, which we have support classes, we have independent learning time, we have contact time with teachers. So during those times, they do use technology and close the online session for them. So that blending was successful after many trial and error. So I can see good result in the term papers which are coming in. Kids are writing.
For us also, I'll just take 1 minute. For us also, it is
of
like
course,
we have
take as many minutes as you'd like.
Thank you so much. So for us also, we have created folders for every student subject wise. So for me, as in math, students don't like to write the steps at all. Just directly they'll jump to the answer. So what we do basically is every day, whatever we discuss in class, they have to make their own notes and then click a picture and put it in the respective folder, classwork folder. Likewise, there's a folder for homework. And definitely teacher cannot check every day. So, once a week, the teacher will go through it and we definitely give a warning. If twice they are defaulters, then a mail will be sent. So this way we maintain.
Thank you ever so much. A very quick question right at the end. Somebody has asked a while ago, so I would like to squeeze it in there if we can. How did enrollment change during the pandemic? So online interviews or entrance tests or anything. So we only have a few minutes, but would anyone just like to explain how enrollment changed during the pandemic at their school? Sanchita?
Yeah, it has been...
Yeah, so please go ahead. Please go ahead. Please.
For us, it has been completely online, right from, starting with the inquiry form, filling up of the inquiry form and the registration and the first orientation and then one-on-one interaction. In fact, I would say the one-on-one interaction has worked very well because of this virtual platform. It is much better streamlined, and this could be something that we would like to keep with us for posterity, for future purposes. Yeah.
Thank you.
We normally do the baseline assessment through CAT4 by GL assessments. And sometimes we use some of the diagnostic questions that we have over Century also. So it's like a blend of different things that we do at our school for online, interviews. And then, of course, one-on-one interviews are a very regular trend that we do.
Thank you. Anybody else? There's 1 minute if they want to just add how they've been dealing with that during the pandemic.
For us also, it went well actually, in fact. So we present and now we are taking it that we may continue a few of these things even once the things are normal, because it's easy to connect to the parents to one-to-one, as ma'am said, that's true. Second, even for the assessments, expecting them to travel from, we are a boarding school, so expecting them to travel from a long distance to our place just to write on the assessment, because after that we take time to check that all, and it takes time to process the things. So not full process, but yes, more than half of the process can be managed online, and we will continue with that.
Fantastic. I'd just like to say thank you ever so much for joining us, everybody. hearing from you and your experience before the pandemic and during the pandemic has been invaluable, and I've been keeping one eye on the chat. Lots of people have found it very helpful and inspirational, so thank you so much for being with us this afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Wonderful. I'd just like to echo Dr. Triggs. What a really insightful discussion around such an important topic. And if you haven't had a chance to have a look at the chat and some of the questions that have come through, please, panelists, do have a look. I'm sure there's additional comments that you can add and provide to a really engaged audience who have stuck with us throughout. It's now time to move on to the final agenda item of today, our closing keynote speaker, who has had a phenomenally long and experienced life in the world of education, 23 years spanning over 3 continents. Mr. Brian Cooklin is someone that I met in, I believe, early 2019 at a London conference. And that was when he was the founding principal of Anglia International School in Hong Kong. I later went to visit him in Hong Kong and learn more about his school. That is a multi-campus school and has won all sorts of awards for various outstanding academic results, as well as highest possible ratings from independent schools inspectorate. Brian Cooklin is now the managing director of Anglia India. And he is leading the strategic development and support of the leadership teams across all 5 Oak Ridge International Schools, which are based in Hyderabad, Bengaluru, Mohali, and Visakhapatnam. Probably said that wrong, but I'll give it my best stab. We're very privileged to have Brian here today to close up what's been a fantastic agenda. Brian, over to you. The stage is yours.
Thank you very much, Charles, and thank you for that kind introduction. We call it VISAG for short, by the way. But let me first of all thank everyone who's participated today in whatever form. So whether you've been delivering a keynote address, asking questions, acting as a panelist, you have all contributed to what I think has been an insightful and a valuable and interesting opportunity to get an understanding of what's happening in India in terms of educational technology and what the future may hold. We started the session with the keynote address from Rhiannon Davies, the Deputy Trade Commissioner, who highlighted the importance of the bilateral and collaborative working that's been taking place over a period of time and the opportunities that there are for ed tech development in the future. And I particularly liked the way that she identified India's contribution, because it is a cutting edge contribution that India makes. There are a lot of innovative and creative ideas in educational technology that come from India, and I think they need to be more widely recognized. And they also need to be more widely implemented in India itself. Our next speaker, Dr. Lulla, started with a quotation from Mahatma Gandhi, and it very much reminded me of another quotation from the great Mahatma Gandhi about education, where he said that education was the drawing out of the body, the mind, and the spirit. And it's that holistic approach to education which I think ran as a strand throughout today's proceedings. Dr. Lulla talked about the impact around the world of COVID, both positive and negative. And that's been something that certainly interested me too. On the positive side, I've been very interested in looking at those groups who have made outstanding progress, not just normal progress, throughout the pandemic, when perhaps would have least expected it. And the 2 groups that fascinate me, one is the group of shy, quiet, reserved students who in class would never offer an answer, but online have blossomed, producing a quality of work and a caliber of writing and insight unforeseen previously. And the group of boys who in class may have been disaffected, disinterested for part of the time, who have seen online learning as more the gamification of learning And because they're so used to using their devices in that way, they too have gained enormously. And one of my aims is to make sure we don't lose sight of either of those groups as we return to more physical, face-to-face learning. On the negative side, of course, there are two groups in particular I would single out who I feel have lost most. One is the youngest group, the nursery, the early years children, because what they learn more than anything else at that stage is the socialization, is the capacity to work in a team, to develop their gross and fine motor skills, to work with the teacher in terms of developing those foundational skills for learning. Because we know that between birth and age 5, 90% of the brain's development takes place. And so any opportunities to develop the brain at that stage is significant. And therefore any time lost is also clearly harmful to the development of any child. And the other group I think lost out were the grade 12s, because they didn't have those end of school experiences that we so cherish, the expeditions, the trips, the social involvement with their peers. And that, I think, sums up the negative aspect of it. Dr. Lulla identified that the entire ecosystem has changed, and yet we've adapted so well. And she emphasized the personalized pathways and personalized learning being enhanced, and gave the example of students in her school developing apps. And I think we've seen that around the world, where children have risen to the occasion. And there has been an unleashing of ideas and creativity, which has been quite stunning at times. And importantly, what she wanted us to do, quite rightly, I think, is to build on that usage of technology for the future. And that's a recurrent theme of not losing what we've gained and not reverting to type and perhaps doing what we've always done. Our first panel discussion focused on technology and how it's been deployed, and of course referred to the gaps that many schools lack devices. Many parents didn't have the hands-on knowledge of the technology to be able to use it in an educational way. And there are fundamental issues. There's no point in our donating devices to schools in different parts of India if there's no proper internet or Wi-Fi access. So there will need to be massive investment at the government level to give everyone a reasonable chance of accessing technology for the benefit of all. Social adaptation, again, was identified as the bigger problem than anything else. And there was a clear demonstration that blended learning is here to stay, and that it should continue, because it is that point of harnessing the best of both worlds. But I think we must be very conscious that as we return to more face-to-face learning, we still have online learning running at the same time. And the hybrid learning model is a difficult one for teachers to deliver because they're pulled in different directions. If you're teaching a whole class face-to-face, that's one medium. If you're teaching them all online, that's another single medium. If you're doing half and half, then you have those demands of, you're not giving me enough attention, I'm on the screen, or you're not giving me enough attention, I'm in the classroom. And I think we must be very conscious of the problems that teachers will have in this situation. We've got to use all of our capacity to train and support staff in what is, I think, a stressful situation. The discussion moved on in the panel about whether or not there should be more use of technology. And it was rightly stated that teachers are not robots and cannot be replaced by robots or by AI for that matter. And I think Century Tech, although it is an AI company, couldn't agree more. Because I think the whole direction of educational technology is to see it as a tool that reinforces learning, not a substitute for teaching. There can never be a machine that takes the place of a teacher, because the human dynamic is the most important part of learning. The teacher's capacity to form a rapport, a relationship with the class and with each individual member in that class is the key intervention that makes a difference in each child's learning. The tool that the technology provided obviously helps. It can reinforce the learning, it can add value, but it can't replace it. And the panel rightly discussed what kind of technology we should be using and about the issues over cybersecurity. We were then treated to a tour de force by Priya, as you would expect, passionately describing her commitment to education, the social enterprise that the company is, and her recognition of the importance of technology in addressing disrupted learning and the learning gaps that exist in so many societies and around the world. And identifying that 60% of teacher time is on written tasks, often unnecessary written tasks, and that this was one of the driving forces in terms of Century Tech, devising something that would make a difference, not just to a child's learning, but also to a teacher's capacity to deliver that learning. It was therefore driven by a need to empower teachers, to improve efficacy, to differentiate, to personalise. She touched on the ethics, on the future of assessment, which the panel discussion then ventured into, and about the holistic picture of knowledge and skills. We then had a fascinating discussion on the future of assessment, about benchmarking, about the planning tools, about target setting, and various pieces of software that different schools have used, whether it be Flipgrid or Padlet or other means, Kahoot quizzes, for example, other means to engage and develop and assess. Perhaps we didn't really touch on peer assessment and self-assessment, but they became growing tools as well. And when there was discussion of the purpose of assessment, I think we have to be quite clear about what we as educators see as the purpose of assessment. And that's different from the purpose of the assessment system. Because many educators, many teachers would complain that what they're doing and teaching in class is very much driven by a next stage. In other words, they have to get certain grades in order to gain entry to university, college, or a career. And that distorts what the teacher may want to do to improve the learning of the child. And I think we have to be very clear about that controversial issue. Because during the pandemic, we've seen how it's changed, that there have been parts of the world where teacher assessment is said to be accepted as the final judgment. In others, it's been challenged as being too subjective. And in all cases, grades have been questioned. Why has there been a big increase? Why have people got these better grades? And universities and employers have had to accept whatever judgment's been made in whatever format. And that calls into question, did we need the previous system? Do we need it at all? When you have companies like Google and Amazon saying, well, we don't really look at, and Microsoft saying we don't really look at whether or not you have a university degree anymore, we have our own assessment of your skills, then we do have to ask fundamental questions in all countries about what exactly we're doing and why we're doing it. So an interesting conversation on assessment about the use of technology, about the reliability, inclusivity, the validity of it, about the different purposes and the different tasks and skills we should be analysing, like collaborative skills, for example, and using self-reflective tools. Quite a discussion about formative and about summative assessment. And maybe something I've often seen, a confusion and an overlap between the two. Professor John Hattie makes clear, as one of the panelists said, that feedback is the most important aspect to the improvement of attainment and learning. And the power of that feedback for the individual is significant. And that's something we shouldn't lose sight of. Now, throughout, we've been looking at these various aspects of digital technology, the future of assessment and the elements of blended learning. But as far as the future of education in India is concerned, we have a driving force in the national education policy. But we have other aspects of education in India that are equally important. And they centre around areas like professional development, personalised learning, the well-being of staff and of students likewise. And what we see are those challenges in learning and in education in general, but also the challenges we have in the world around us. There's an Indian proverb that says, life is not a continuum of pleasant choices, but of inevitable problems that call for strength, determination, and hard work. And what we're looking to do is to shape a generation of resilient global citizens who will change our world for the better. And to do that, we need to focus on their well-being, their resilience, and the purpose. In our North Anglia education schools, we have 76 of them in 31 countries. We are fortunate to have those global connections and networking amongst the students and amongst the staff. Amongst the students, we have what we call Global Campus, projects that run from age 3 to 18, connecting children around the world. And amongst those projects, there are ones devoted to well-being. It's the same for staff. Our online portal for professional development called North Anglia University contains a wide range of well-being initiatives and projects. But this is something that many schools in different parts of the world are doing, because what the pandemic has shown us is the need for us to be developing our own health and well-being and resilience in a way that we might never have done before. That global connection is equally important, and the need through that to develop creativity. In our case, our collaboration with MIT and the STEAM challenges we have for age 3 to 18 every term is a great driver. But many schools around the world have different forms of the same idea. Whatever you're doing and whatever you're using across schools in India, it's for the benefit of all the children to ensure we're harnessing that kind of creativity that Dr. Lulla, for example, identified with the development of apps by children in her school. An interesting finding has been the enhanced parent visibility of the child's education through this pandemic. And that's something that we want to harness for the future. We often talk about the partnership we have with parents in the education of their child, but it's very much been underlined by their involvement and experience during the pandemic. What Century Tech and other forms of technology have done is to improve the efficacy of teachers' roles. It's allowed teachers to have access to detailed information about the progress of each child in their class, and it's added a sense of job satisfaction. It's helped to have tech-ready teachers who are going to provide future-ready students. In a nutshell, that's what today's been about. I hope that all of you have found something to take away from this, that you'll be able to think about and use for the benefit of your students. Thank you for your involvement and thank you for your attention.
Brian, thank you very much, and what a wonderful way to wrap up this celebration of the future of education in India. Thank you for your contribution and so many things that you touched upon that I think we can all think about, from equity to assessment to teaching and learning. But I think that we can all agree that this has been a hugely positive celebration of the future of education in India, and we're so proud to be a partner with you and your schools. So thank you very much for taking part in today's celebration. That is it, everyone. We're very proud to have delivered this, and none of this would have been able to happen without the support of the Department for International Trade, as well as our partner schools, Oak Ridge International and Podar Education. So thank you very much to all of those schools. And thank you to all of our individual speakers, from our keynote speakers to our panelists. Fascinating insights, and you've provided people with inspiration and hopefully things that they can take away and implement in their classrooms across India. I'd also like to thank you, the audience, for giving up so much of your time today to come and listen, and hopefully you found it beneficial. The conversation doesn't end here. We are on social media. We have a website, which is www.century.tech. So please check us out, see what we're doing, and we'd be happy to connect with you further. You can also contact us directly. So there are a couple of email addresses there. So please do get in touch if you'd like to learn more. Now, none of these events would be able to happen without the team behind me. And those are often people that you don't see. We have a fantastic marketing team, Anastasia Toll and Ellie Cormack, as well as our events specialist, Jess Collett, and of course, Daniel Malaburn, who puts all of this together in terms of the Zoom setup. So please join me in thanking the team for being able to deliver this free event to everyone today. And we're really privileged to be able to do that. So that's it from me and the team at Century. Thank you all very much for your time today. We hope to keep in touch and look out for the next Future Indian Learning Summit, which we hope will take place next year. Have a great rest of the week, and thanks again.